former hip-hop star Tory Lanez. According to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, Lanez was stabbed by inmate Santino Casio.
Lil Durk, Pooh Shiesty, Young Thug, YB. And those are just 4 of the names we're getting into today. We got rappers who walked into prison with ops already waiting to clap them up. Rappers who got jumped, rappers who had hits put out on them while they were locked up, and some who genuinely almost didn't make it out breathing. Some of these stories you heard about, some of these got buried and the blogs never even caught it.
Chicago rapper Lil Durk is in police custody this morning.
And he was allegedly involved in a murder-for-hire plot.
Rapper Young Thug will appear in court this morning. The rapper, whose real name is Jeffrey Williams Jr., was arrested Monday on a 56-count racketeering indictment.
That indictment alleges his YSL record label is a criminal street gang that has committed murder, assault, and threats of violence.
But we're pulling everything up today and putting it all in one place. So if you're not subscribed yet, do that right now because you don't want to miss a single story on this one. It gets real heavy real fast. Now let's get into it. Starting things off with Pooh Shiesty because his situation inside was genuinely alarming from day one.
Rappers by the stage names of Pooh Shiesty and Big 30 have been arrested along with several others, and they're accused of robbing and kidnapping another rapper.
Hey man, you was in there standing there while you were eating. When they bumped down on you, they asked you, is you one of these 5 or is you a rapper? You said a rapper. I got facts about these, man. Hey man, I'm on your ass, man. You know what I'm talking about, man? Cause why, hold on, man. You ain't stand up? You ain't sit down? When it was time to stand on business? So you let a nigga basically get you, man, made you stand up and eat your food. I thought you supposed to sit down and eat. Man, he got the internet food, man. That nigga a hoe in jail, man. That nigga a buster, nigga. And I can get the penitentiary on the phone, nigga. For real.
I thought I knew about Memphis rap. Everybody thinks these rappers are some kind of gods and untouchable, but inside prison, nobody can protect them. Picture this. Pooh Shiesty, the same dude who had the whole country screaming back in blood, is getting cornered in federal jail, forced to perform like some kind of jailhouse entertainer just to eat in peace. But wait, it gets worse. Word is he getting treated like a real hoe without his Draco. They had this man standing up during meals like he was being punished in elementary school, taking his commissary, and when the real inmates asked him, "You one of us or just a rapper?" he supposedly folded faster than a lawn chair. But here's the twist that's about to blow your mind. I got exclusive footage of a 32-year prison veteran going live just to defend Pooh Shiesty's name. This old head put his whole reputation on the line, and what he revealed will completely flip everything you think you know about what really went down behind them walls. No cap, by the time this video ends, you gon' know exactly who was lying, who was telling the truth, and why some people in Memphis would rather see their own golden boy destroyed than see him succeed. This story got more layers than an onion, and I'm about to peel back every single one. Pooh Shiesty was sitting on top of the rap game, millions of streams, platinum plaques, and the whole city of Memphis behind him. But when them federal charges hit in 2021, everything changed. The streets started watching, waiting to see if the same energy from his music would translate behind bars. But here's what really went down. While Pooh Shiesty was locked up, stories started leaking from inside federal prison that painted a completely different picture than what his fans expected. We talking about allegations that could destroy a street rapper's reputation forever. To understand how deep this rabbit hole goes, we gotta go back to when Pooh Shiesty first walked through them prison doors. But first, make sure y'all smash that like button real quick for your boy. Let's rewind to 2021. Pooh Shiesty was on fire. Back in blood, with Lil Durk was breaking the internet and he was being hailed as the next king of Memphis rap. But that federal case for shooting in Miami caught up with him real quick. When Pooh Shiesty got sentenced to federal time, the whole hip-hop world was watching. He took a plea deal in January of 2022, pleading guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to possess firearms in furtherance of violent and drug trafficking crimes. The government was pushing for 10 years. His lawyers fought hard and got him 63 months.
Rapper Pooh Shiesty is facing prison time after pleading guilty to a gun charge in Miami federal court. The case against Lontrell Williams Jr. stems from 3 shootings during the past 2 years, 2 of them happening right here in South Florida.
This wasn't county jail we talking about. This was big boy prison, where your rap sheet don't mean nothing if you can't back it up. Federal prison got its own rules, its own politics, and for a young rapper from Memphis, it was about to be the ultimate test. Now in federal prison, you got different factions. You got your gangs, your geographical cliques, and then you got the unaffiliated. When a high-profile rapper like Pooh Shiesty walks in, everybody watching to see which category he gonna fall into. But here's where it gets crazy. Stories started spreading that Pooh Shiesty wasn't moving like the street legend his music painted him to be. We talking about allegations that would make any rapper's worst nightmare come true. According to sources that started popping up online, Pooh Shiesty was facing some serious pressure behind them walls. We got Memphis inmates going on social media claiming they got the real tea on how Shiesty was moving in federal prison. One particular Memphis voice came forward with some explosive allegations. This dude claimed that Pooh Shiesty was getting extorted, forced to stand up while eating his meals like some kind of punk. But that's not even the crazy part. According to this same source, when the real ones in the pen stepped to Pooh Shiesty asking, "Is you one of the five or is you a rapper?" Meaning, are you really about that life or just entertainment? Pooh Shiesty allegedly chose rapper. Now, for any street artist, that's basically admitting you're not really built like that. The Memphis streets started buzzing. Here's this dude who was rapping about sliding, shooting, and street politics, allegedly getting his card pulled in real time. The source didn't stop there either. He claimed Pooh Shiesty was getting moved around, having to follow orders from real inmates, basically getting treated like he was food. But here's where it gets real. Another part of the allegations was that Pooh Shiesty was having to freestyle and perform for other inmates just to get by. Picture this. The same dude who was getting millions of streams having to rap for his safety behind bars. That's some next level humiliation if it's true. Fast forward through his bid and these stories keep circulating. Memphis blogs picking it up, street talk spreading, and Pooh Shiesty's reputation taking hits while he can't even defend himself properly from inside. According to the same Memphis inmate making these claims, Pooh Shiesty got labeled as a hoe and a buster in the pen. For any rapper, especially one who built their whole image on being tough, these are career-ending allegations. Now here's something that don't get talked about enough: the money situation. Pooh Shiesty went into prison as a platinum-selling artist with serious paper behind him. And in federal prison, money moves everything. While regular inmates is surviving on whatever the kitchen serves, a rich inmate living in a completely different world behind the same walls. We talking about a federal commissary account that never runs dry. See, in federal prison, your people on the outside can put money on your books, and Pooh Shiesty had an entire label, management team, and fan base who wasn't letting his account go empty. When you got that kind of money flowing in, you eating different. We talking ramen noodles stacked 6 deep, real tuna packs, honey buns, chips, protein bars. Inmates be building whole meals out of commissary that would surprise you. Pooh Shiesty himself confirmed in interviews after getting out that he was eating steaks behind bars. Not metaphorical steaks, actual meat. And when you understand how federal prison commissary and kitchen politics work, that makes complete sense. When you got money, you can pay other inmates to cook for you, trade for better cuts of food, and basically run your own little restaurant operation inside them walls. The man was never going hungry, not even close. But it goes deeper than just food. In federal prison, money buys peace of mind in ways that most people don't understand from the outside. You can buy hygiene products so you don't gotta use the basic stuff the prison hands out. You can buy better shoes, better clothes within the uniform rules, better everything. When you sitting on platinum royalties while everybody else is broke, that changes your entire dynamic inside. And here's the thing people don't talk about. That commissary wealth can also make you a target. When word spreads that a certain inmate got unlimited funds coming in, that's exactly the kind of situation that leads to extortion attempts. So the question of whether Pooh Shiesty got pressed over his commissary is actually more complicated than it sounds. Having that kind of money in a place like federal prison is both a blessing and a curse at the same time. Now let's get into something that really got the streets talking: the protective custody situation. This right here is where it gets sensitive, because in prison culture, PC carries a specific stigma that can follow you for life. Protective custody means you're separated from the general population, usually because either you requested protection or administration decided you needed it for your own safety. On paper, it sounds reasonable. In prison culture, it's one of the most damaging labels you can carry. Word started circulating that at some point during his bid, Pooh Shiesty was placed in or around protective custody status. Now, whether that was his choice or the administration's decision is a whole other conversation. See, when a high-profile celebrity walks into federal prison, the Bureau of Prisons don't just throw them in general population and hope for the best. They do a security assessment. They look at who that person is, what enemies they might have inside. What safety risks exist? For somebody as famous as Pooh Shiesty, with his face plastered all over the internet, the administration got real reasons to be cautious. Think about it from the prison's perspective. If a famous rapper gets seriously hurt or killed on their watch, that's a national news story and a massive liability. So sometimes PC isn't even a choice the inmate makes. Administration can place you there whether you want it or not, and then you gotta deal with the stigma that comes with it. But the streets don't care about the bureaucratic reasoning. In that world, PC means one thing: you couldn't survive with the real population. And that narrative started attaching itself to Pooh Shiesty's name while he was still locked up and couldn't address it. The Memphis blogs picked it up, the gossip accounts ran with it, and suddenly the PC angle got mixed in with all the other allegations swirling around his name. Now here's where it gets real interesting. Multiple accounts from people who were actually in the same facility during the same time period came out on both sides of this. Some claiming Shiesty was in PC the whole time, others saying they saw him in general population moving normal. That contradiction alone should tell you that not everybody making these claims was actually there or actually telling the truth. Now, here's where the story takes a major turn. When these allegations started getting real traction online, Pooh Shiesty finally got a chance to respond. Not directly, but through an OG who'd been down for over 30 years. And this OG went on live and basically put his reputation on the line to defend Pooh Shiesty. We talking about a man who'd been in federal prison for 32 years, seen everything, done everything, and got his respect locked in concrete. When somebody like that vouches for you, that carries weight. According to this prison OG, all them stories about Pooh Shiesty getting extorted and pressed were straight cap. He said Pooh Shiesty stayed in his lane, minded his business, and wasn't out there trying to prove nothing to nobody. The OG made it clear, Pooh Shiesty was solid and he ain't seen none of the weird behavior people was talking about online. But let's break down what really happened when Pooh Shiesty spoke about his prison experience. In interviews after getting out, Pooh Shiesty talked about how he was cooking every day behind bars. Not just regular prison noodles and commissary food. This dude was eating steaks, real steaks, not no beef jerky. When the interviewer tried to clarify what he meant, Pooh Shiesty made it crystal clear. He wasn't talking about no $1,000 steaks, but he was eating better than most inmates. That alone tells you somebody was looking out for him, or he had enough respect and resources to live comfortable. And when you consider the money on his books, it actually makes total sense. Pooh Shiesty also mentioned that his daily routine was writing music constantly. While other inmates was caught up in prison politics, Pooh Shiesty was stacking verses and planning his comeback. That mindset right there shows you what his priorities was. He even called into $1 million worth of game during his bid and talked about his experiences. That kind of access, being able to call into a major podcast from federal prison, that don't happen for just anybody. That's the kind of move that requires resources, connections, and a certain level of freedom within the system. The OG who vouched for Pooh Shiesty explained it best. In federal prison, if you're moving wrong, everybody gonna know about it. The fact that a respected lifer was willing to put his name behind Pooh Shiesty says a lot about what really went down. But the Memphis streets wasn't done talking. The same dude making the allegations came back harder, doubling down on his claims about Pooh Shiesty getting punked. He said he was rich before rap, been all over the country, done multiple bids, and knew real from fake when he saw it. Let's talk about something else that don't get enough attention. What it's actually like being a celebrity in federal prison on a day-to-day basis. Because that experience is completely different from what a regular inmate goes through, and most people watching from the outside don't understand the dynamics at all. When you're famous and you walk into federal prison, your name arrives before you do. Guards know who you are. Other inmates know who you are. Administration knows who you are. That celebrity status creates a situation where everybody wants something from you. Some inmates want to be your friend because they think it benefits them somehow. Some want to test you because they see your fame as a challenge to their reputation. Some want to genuinely connect because they actually listen to your music, and some want to extort you specifically because they know you got money and connections outside. Now imagine navigating all of that every single day while also trying to keep your head right, avoid catching new charges, and actually survive your bid with your mind intact. That's the situation Pooh Shiesty walked into. The celebrity tax in federal prison is real. Everybody expects something from you, and you gotta figure out fast who got genuine respect for you versus who's running a play. There's also the visitation angle. Regular inmates might get visits from family once a month if they're lucky. A famous rapper got managers, lawyers, label people, and family all trying to get in there. That kind of traffic gets noticed by everybody in the facility. When the CO is calling your name for a legal visit 3 times a week while other dudes is sitting there doing dead time, that creates tension. Some inmates see that and respect it, others see it and resent it. And then you got the phone situation. Federal prison phone time is limited and expensive, but when you got money on your books, you buying phone time the same way you'd buy anything else. Pooh Shiesty was allegedly keeping in contact with his team, his people, staying plugged into what was happening in the music world. That kind of connectivity while locked up is a privilege that money provides, and it's something the average inmate can only dream about. And so now we got 2 completely different stories floating around. On one hand, you got Memphis inmates claiming Pooh Shiesty was getting his commissary took and having to stand while he ate. On the other hand, you got a 32-year federal prison veteran saying Pooh Shiesty was solid and all them stories was false. Here's what we know for facts. Pooh Shiesty did his time without any major incidents that made the news. If he was really getting pressed like these allegations claim, something would have leaked to the media or court documents. Federal prison incidents get documented, especially when it involves high-profile inmates. The allegations about him having to freestyle for protection don't line up with what we know about his prison experience either. Pooh Shiesty consistently said he was focused on writing music and staying out the way. If he was really getting extorted for performances, that would be a completely different story than what he'd been telling. But let's examine the psychology behind these allegations. When a young, successful rapper gets locked up, there's always going to be people trying to tear down their image. It's part of the culture. If you can't make it in music, sometimes people try to destroy those who did. The Memphis inmate making these claims seemed personally invested in damaging Pooh Shiesty's reputation. He kept emphasizing how he was rich before rap, how he'd been everywhere, how he did multiple bids. That sounds like somebody trying to establish credibility to tear down another man's success. Meanwhile, the prison OG defending Pooh Shiesty had nothing to gain from lying. A man doing life ain't worried about rap politics or social media clout. When somebody like that speaks up, it's usually because they seen something that bothered them. The fact that Pooh Shiesty came home and immediately started going viral again with new music also tells a story. If he was really traumatized or broken down by his prison experience, would he be able to bounce back that quick? His first days out, he was already doing live streams, connecting with fans and looking like the same confident artist who went in. Here's another important detail. Pooh Shiesty never did no formal sit-down interview trying to prove how tough he was in prison. A lot of rappers come home and immediately start telling war stories about their bid to rebuild their street credibility. Pooh Shiesty ain't really do that. He kept his prison experience private for the most part, which actually shows more real confidence than trying to convince everybody how solid you was. This whole situation shines a light on something bigger in hip-hop culture. Every time a young, successful rapper gets locked up, the vultures start circling. People start making up stories, trying to tear down their image, especially when that rapper represents success that others couldn't achieve. Memphis rap politics been complicated for years. You got different neighborhoods, different crews, and a lot of competition for who really represents the city. When Pooh Shiesty blew up nationwide, that automatically made him a target for people who felt like they deserved that spot. The allegations against Pooh Shiesty follow a pattern we've seen before. Successful artist gets locked up, stories leak about them getting punked in prison, their reputation takes hits while they can't defend themselves. But here's the thing. Most of these stories turn out to be false when you really investigate them. Let's be real about what prison politics actually look like. Federal prison ain't like county jail where you might get pressed for your commissary every day. Federal inmates doing serious time got bigger things to worry about than extorting rappers. Most of them already established in their own situations. The idea that Pooh Shiesty was forced to freestyle for protection also doesn't make logical sense. If somebody really wanted to extort a rapper in federal prison, they wouldn't be asking for performances. They'd be asking for money on the books or connections on the outside. What's more likely is that Pooh Shiesty did exactly what the prison OG said. He minded his business, stayed in his lane, and focused on his music. That's actually the smartest way to do federal time, especially for somebody young with everything to lose. The fact that multiple people vouched for Pooh Shiesty's character in prison while the allegations came from people who seem to have personal issues with his success tells you what the real story probably is. Now that Pooh Shiesty got home and started making moves again, his actions speak louder than any prison stories. He earned an early release through time served and good behavior. The government originally wanted 10 years. He served 3. That's a fact. You don't get good behavior credits by wilding out and getting extorted on your unit. But here's the update that changes the whole story one more time, because this situation got another chapter that most people sleeping on. After getting out in October of 2025, Pooh Shiesty barely had time to breathe before the system came back for him. He was placed in a residential re-entry facility in Dallas as part of his supervised release. Basically a halfway house situation where he had restrictions on his movement. And then just a few months after getting out, he caught a rearrest. The details are still developing, but supervised release violations can send you right back in faster than you think. And then in early 2026, the FBI raided the family home in Memphis. Law enforcement showed up at the house looking for something. And when the feds come knocking at your people's door, that ain't a courtesy call. Whether this connects to the rearrest or a separate investigation is still unclear, but the pattern is hard to ignore. Here's the real conversation though. Pooh Shiesty is 25 years old, came up in one of the hardest cities in America, made it to platinum records and national fame before most people his age figure out what they want to do with their life. The system clearly ain't done with him. Whether that's because he's genuinely still caught up in the streets or because fame puts a target on your back from law enforcement, we can't say for certain. Probably some combination of both. Federal supervised release is no joke. You got restrictions on where you can go, who you can be around, what you can post on social media, and who you can associate with. For a 25-year-old rapper from Memphis with the whole entertainment industry trying to pull him back in, navigating all of those restrictions while also trying to rebuild a career is nearly impossible. One wrong move and you back in a cell. Federal prison is designed to break people down mentally and spiritually. The fact that Pooh Shiesty came out still creative, still connected to his fan base, and still making moves means he handled his time the right way inside. Whether he handles the streets on the other side of that is a whole different test, and right now, the jury is still out on that one. The prison OG who vouched for him put it best. In federal prison, the real ones survive and the fake ones don't. The fact that Pooh Shiesty made it through his bid with his sanity and his career intact says everything you need to know about his character inside. But prison and the streets are two different games with two different rules. At the end of the day, these prison allegations happen to almost every rapper who gets locked up. It's part of the game. What separates the real from the fake is how you respond when you get home. Pooh Shiesty responded by making music, connecting with his fans, and moving like somebody who learned from his experience instead of somebody who got broken by it. But the chapter after prison, that might be the hardest chapter he ever had to write. And so when people ask me whether I believe them stories about Pooh Shiesty getting extorted in prison, I point to the facts. He ate well because he had money. He survived because he was smart. He got vouched for by a man with nothing to gain. And he came home early because his behavior was right. The allegations came from people who had everything to gain and nothing to verify. But survival in federal prison and survival in the real world are different skills. And right now, Pooh Shiesty fighting that second battle in real time. The Memphis rap game needs him in it, and his whole story, from the platinum records to the prison bid to the re-entry struggles, is exactly the kind of real-life documentary that his music was always supposed to represent. Whether the next chapter ends in redemption or setback, no cap, we watching. That's the real story on how Pooh Shiesty was treated in prison, the money game behind them walls, the PC allegations, and what happened when he got out. Let me know in the comments what y'all think about these allegations and whether you believe the stories or the people vouching for him. Make sure you like this video if it opened your eyes to something new, subscribe if you want more real street stories, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss when I drop the next one. Until next time, keep it solid.
Chicago rapper Lil Durk faces 3 new federal charges in connection to a deadly shooting in Los Angeles in August of 2022. The Grammy Award-winning rapper, whose legal name is Dirk Banks, is charged along with 5 alleged co-conspirators in a murder-for-hire plot. Prosecutors say he masterminded a plot to kill Chicago rapper Quando Rondo at a Los Angeles gas station, but Rondo's cousin was killed instead. According to the FBI, the hit was in retaliation for the murder of another Chicago rapper, King Von, in 2020. Lil Durk remains in federal custody in Miami, where he was arrested last month.
Lil Durk is sitting in a federal detention center in Los Angeles right now. Not a state pen, not a county jail, a federal facility, the Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC, Los Angeles. And inside that building, the man born Dirk Derek Banks, the first Chicago drill rapper to ever win a Grammy, the man whose album went top 3 on the Billboard 200 while he was already locked up, has been stripped to the bare minimum of what the federal government will allow a human being to have before they've even been convicted of anything. 23 hours a day in a cell barely big enough to hold a single bed, a toilet, and a sink. No commissary, no in-person visits, one phone call per month, not one call a day, not one call a week, one phone call every 30 days, for a man with 7 kids, for a man with a wife, for a man who has watched his trial get delayed 4 separate times and has now been inside that building since October 2024, over a year and a half. No conviction, no trial, no verdict. And the reason he was put in that hole? An Apple Watch. That's what his lawyers say. That's what the court filings say. That's what allhiphop.com reported after obtaining the documents themselves. On August 29, 2025, Durk was placed in solitary confinement, the Segregated Housing Unit, the SHU, at MDC Los Angeles. Staff alleged he had a contraband Apple Watch with cellular capabilities. They alleged he tried to destroy it when they came to take it, and from that moment they dropped him in the hole. 131 consecutive days in that box before his legal team even got a court to look at what was happening to him.
So Lil Durk was caught with an Apple Watch in jail and attempted to destroy it, authorities say on Monday. The prosecution filed a motion to Durk's murder for hire case requesting an anonymous jury for the upcoming trial. The motion cites authorities finding out that Durk was in possession of an Apple Watch in August, a significant risk of witness tampering.
And when they finally filed that motion in January of 2026, his attorney Christy O'Connor wrote this in the court filing, word for word. The psychological toll of extended solitary confinement is well documented. Y'all, this man has not been convicted. He has pleaded not guilty. He is, by the law of this country, innocent until proven otherwise. And he spent 5 months in a box the size of a parking space. That is how Lil Durk is being treated in prison. And we are just getting started. To understand what is happening to Durk inside that facility, we have to understand how he got there and why the federal government has the position it does on this man. Go back to October 20th, 2024. Durk is performing at the United Center in Chicago on his birthday, the same arena where Michael Jordan played Fam, to a packed house. Lil Baby on stage with him. Sexy Red, Boss Man Low, JT. He had just won a Grammy in February 2024 for Best Melodic Rap Performance for All My Life with J. Cole, the first Chicago drill artist to ever win one. He had a new album in the works. He had a nonprofit, Neighborhood Heroes, doing real community work in Chicago. Everything looked like it was going in one direction. 4 days later, on October 24th, 2024, U.S. Marshals caught Durk near Miami International Airport. The feds say he had booked international flights to Dubai and to Switzerland. They said he was trying to run. The FBI assistant director in charge of the LA field office, Akil Davis, went public with it. The apprehension of Mr. Banks as he attempted to leave the United States is once again proof that the FBI and our extraordinary partners have a long reach. No excuse can justify this violent act. The charges stem from an August 19, 2022 shooting at a gas station near the Beverly Center Mall in West Hollywood, Los Angeles.
Micah and Cher, you can see this mobile station here across the street from the Beverly Center, and we can tell you that they have a couple of suspects in custody right now. Reports of shots fired here, not clear as to whether anybody was hit or not.
Quando Rondo, born Tiquian Terrell Bowman, and his cousin Saviaya Lulpab Robinson, 24 years old, pulled up in a black Cadillac Escalade. Gunmen opened fire. Rondo escaped. Robinson was killed. The feds alleged that Durk, in retaliation for the November 2020 shooting death of King Von in Atlanta, organized, financed, and directed 5 members of his Only the Family collective to travel from Chicago to Los Angeles to track, stalk, and attempt to kill Quando Rondo. The prosecution said Durk even offered those men lucrative music industry opportunities as compensation for participating. Durk was extradited from Florida to California in late November 2024 and placed at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Los Angeles. He entered a plea of not guilty, and right out of the gate, the fight began. Not just the criminal case, but the fight over how he would be treated while the case played out. Gang, let me walk you through what happened when Durk's legal team tried to get him out of that building while awaiting trial, because the bond hearing saga by itself tells you everything about the position the federal government has taken with this man. December 12th, 2024. Bond hearing number 1. His team put together a package. $2.3 million in property, $1 million cash from Sony Music, electronic monitoring, around-the-clock security, surrender of all electronic devices. They brought it to U.S. Magistrate Judge Patricia Donahue in downtown Los Angeles. They laid it all out, denied. The judge's exact words, "I find that there is no condition or combination of conditions that will reasonably assure the safety of the community." She cited the seriousness of the charges and what prosecutors were saying about his international travel plans. Before that hearing even happened, a newly unsealed indictment dropped a second bomb, linking Dirk to a separate January 2022 murder for hire, the killing of Stefan Mack, a Chicago man the FBI identified as a leader of the Smashville faction of the Gangster Disciples. The Fed said this one was allegedly retribution for the 2021 murder of Dirk's own brother, Dante D. Thang Banks. Same statute, same argument, more charges, more weight pressing down. At the same hearing, prosecutors revealed something else. Dirk had allegedly been breaking rules at MDC from the jump. Despite clear instructions not to engage in three-way calls, a sealed exhibit prosecutors filed alleged he had repeatedly abused the phone system at MDC. He reportedly used at least 13 other inmates' phone accounts to make outside calls. 13. The judge said that conduct showed a disrespect for the rules. His attorney, Drew Findling, pushed back, said using other inmates' phone accounts was a common practice inside federal detention centers, said there was no evidence Dirk was doing anything other than trying to contact his family. The judge denied him anyway. That's just the beginning, though. May 8th, 2025, bond hearing number 2. By this point, Dirk's team had completely redesigned the package. They brought in AirSec Group, a Beverly Hills-based licensed private security firm, to provide 24/7 armed monitoring. Not just to report to Dirk, but to report directly to the court itself. Total bond package, over $2 million, curfews, home confinement in a secured property, surveillance systems on site. The defense also scored a significant win right before this hearing. Prosecutors dropped the lyrics from the indictment. They had been trying to use a 2022 track called Wonderful Wayne and Jackie Boy, a collaboration with Babyface Ray, as evidence that Dirk was celebrating and commercializing Lil Pab's murder. Dirk's team produced a sworn affidavit from the song's producer, Justin Gibson, proving the track was recorded approximately 7 to 8 months before the August 2022 shooting. Drew Findling told the court it was provably false that his client had monetized and celebrated the death at the heart of this case. The prosecution backed down, but the case still moved forward. What else did the feds have? They seized an unreleased song of Dirk's called Scoom His Ass, found on a co-defendant's cell phone. Prosecutors argued the lyrics corroborate their case. Dirk raps about riding through Beverly Hills with choppers. The Lil Pab shooting happened approximately 1.5 miles from Beverly Hills in the Beverly Grove neighborhood. Prosecutors told the court that it showed Dirk was the leader of OTF who funded his co-conspirators' violence against rivals, including by placing bounties. His team never officially released that song. The feds found it, seized it, and put it in front of a judge. Bond hearing 2, still denied. Same reason, flight risk, danger to the community. Third attempt, fourth attempt. Findling appealed. The defense came back again and again. Eventually, the package hit $4.5 million. Armed private security from AirSec Group, the full plan, real estate equity, cash from Alamo Records, court supervision, electronic monitoring. U.S. District Judge Michael Fitzgerald heard the fourth attempt and still said no. The judge agreed with prosecution that no combination of conditions would reasonably assure Dirk's appearance in court or the safety of the community. The prosecution's line on all of it: woefully inadequate. Here's the part that should make people stop. Dirk's family called all of it a miscarriage of justice. His dad, Dante Big Dirk Banks, told Rolling Stone his son was staying grounded in his faith. After the June 2025 bond denial, Dirk stood at the defense table in a beige jail uniform and a knit kufi cap. Because he's Muslim, gang, and he has been leaning on his faith through all of this, turned to the gallery, put his right hand over his heart, and smiled at the nearly 24 family members and supporters who had shown up. His dad said, "He's strong and focused. He's still smiling. He's standing on his faith, believing God will make a way." 4 attempts, $4.5 million. Private security that answers to the court. Smile at his people, hand over his heart, walked back into custody. Now here is where the story of how Dirk is being treated inside that prison gets as dark as it gets. Real recognize real. This section is the heart of this whole video. For 11 months after arriving at MDC Los Angeles, according to his own attorneys, Dirk was in general population with no behavioral issues. 11 months, no write-ups they could point to, no fights, no disciplinary problems. He was doing his time, staying in his Muslim faith, reportedly getting described by sources inside the facility as charming and agreeable. Then came August 29, 2025. Bureau of Prisons officials alleged they found Dirk in possession of an unauthorized Apple Watch equipped with cellular capabilities. That's not a regular Apple Watch, fam. That's a device that can make calls and send messages without using the facility's monitored phone system. The feds said that when staff tried to seize it, Dirk attempted to damage and destroy the device. Their motion read, "Even more troubling is Banks's conduct after he was caught. Rather than accept responsibility for this violation, defendant allegedly obstructed the investigation, attempting to damage and slash or destroy the communications device." That same day, August 29th, Dirk was moved from general population into the segregated housing unit, solitary confinement. Let me paint this picture for you the way his own lawyer painted it in a court filing, because the words matter. Attorney Christy O'Connor wrote, "Lil Durk is confined to a very small jail cell, just large enough for a single bed, a toilet, and a sink. He has no access to commissary, only one phone call per month, and no in-person visits. The psychological toll of extended solitary confinement is well documented." Read that again. A cell large enough for a single bed, a toilet, and a sink. 23 hours a day, 1 hour out, no commissary, meaning no outside food, no hygiene products you buy yourself, nothing beyond what the facility issues you, no visits from family or friends, one phone call every 30 days. And here's where the legal violation kicks in, because this is not just hard prison conditions, this is allegedly illegal treatment. Federal Bureau of Prisons regulations state that when an inmate is placed in administrative segregation, solitary confinement, they must receive a unit discipline committee review within 5 working days of being placed there. For more serious infractions, a hearing before a disciplinary hearing officer is required. These are not suggestions, these are federal rules. His legal team argued in their January 2026 motion that Dirk received neither. He was placed in the SHU on August 29, 2025, and as of January 6, 2026, 131 consecutive days later, he still had not received the disciplinary review required by the BOP's own rulebook. But wait, it gets worse. The prison couldn't even get its own story straight on why he was in there. In October 2025, an attorney for MDC told defense counsel that Dirk's celebrity status had nothing to do with placing him in the SHU. But then in December 2025, literally 2 months later, the warden told defense counsel a completely different story. The warden said Dirk was considered a threat to the general public because of the high-profile nature of his case and potential rule violations. So which is it? The Apple Watch? His fame? His case? The Bureau of Prisons gave his lawyers 2 completely contradictory explanations, and throughout all of it, no formal disciplinary hearing was held. His attorneys argued this. First, it's a violation of BOP's own federal regulations. Second, it may violate the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution, the amendment that prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. They filed a motion demanding a status hearing in January 2026. On January 7, 2026, a judge held a hearing, set a February hearing to address the conditions further, and then, on January 15, 2026, approximately 5 months after being dropped in that box, Dirk was released from solitary confinement and moved back to the general population at MDC Los Angeles. He did not walk free. He did not make bail. He moved from the SHU back to the main facility. He is still in federal custody as you watch this video right now in May 2026. But 5 months of solitary confinement without a formal disciplinary process, that's what his legal team had to fight to end. Here's where we connect the dots, because everything happening to Dirk inside that prison, the solitary, the bond denials, the phone rules violations, all of it feeds into a larger picture the federal government has been constructing about who Dirk is and what he represents. The feds do not view Lil Durk as simply a rapper who may have been involved in a violent crime. They have been explicit in court filings about how they see OTF, only the family. In their own words, in motions filed before Judge Michael Fitzgerald, prosecutors have labeled OTF a hybrid organization that blends legitimate business with organized crime. They said OTF operates at the direction of banks as something between a record label and a criminal enterprise. In November 2025, prosecutors wrote in a filing that Dirk and OTF had shown contempt for the judicial process and that members of the organization had already intimidated witnesses, threatened a magistrate judge, and targeted a federal prosecutor. Let that sit for a second. Threatened a magistrate judge and targeted a federal prosecutor. That is not a lyric. That is a sworn filing to a federal court. Here's what happened. According to court documents, Dirk's supporters, not Dirk himself, but people who identify as his supporters, allegedly left 4 violent voicemails for U.S. Magistrate Judge Patricia Donahue, the same judge who denied his first 2 bond requests. Threats so specific and so violent that one caller reportedly vowed to burn this down if Dirk or his co-defendant DeAndre Wilson were convicted. And separately, someone called Assistant U.S. Attorney Ian Yaniello, the lead prosecutor on the case, and threatened to shoot him if Dirk wasn't released. These were not anonymous internet comments. These were direct calls to the phone systems of federal court officers. The government used this to push for something almost unheard of in a standard murder case, an anonymous jury. They asked Judge Fitzgerald to seal the names, addresses, and places of employment of all jurors from both sides, a protection normally reserved for terrorism cases and organized crime trials. The kind of protection you give when you're afraid of what happens if jurors are identified. Dirk's defense team fought back hard. Lead attorney Drew Findling filed a response arguing that an anonymous jury would compromise transparency and fundamental fairness, contradicting Mr. Banks's presumption of innocence. He said such measures should be reserved for cases involving real, immediate danger, not speculation. But the prosecution kept going. In that same November 2025 filing, they accused Dirk of personally directing threats against cooperating witnesses and their family members, people who were expected to testify against him. And on top of the Apple Watch, prosecutors also pointed back to the phone situation, using 13 other inmates' PINs to make calls, doing 3-way calls, circumventing every monitored communication channel the facility had. The government's argument, assembled from all of these pieces, is this: Dirk cannot be trusted to follow rules even when he is locked inside a federal detention center. His people on the outside are threatening judges and prosecutors. Witnesses in his own case are being intimidated. He allegedly tried to destroy evidence. The Apple Watch, on the spot. Given all of that, the feds say, he cannot be released. He cannot be trusted, and the trial needs every protection available, up to and including jurors whose identities are hidden even from his attorneys. Dirk's defense team says all of this is the government using chaos on the margins to build a narrative they cannot sustain at trial. His lead attorney at the time, Drew Findling, has pointed out consistently, Dirk has no prior federal criminal record. The lyrics were thrown out. The one specific fact remaining in the indictment at one point, Findling said, was a single out-of-context text message from August 18, 2022, where Dirk allegedly told a co-conspirator, "Don't book no flights under no names involved with me." The prosecution says that's Dirk covering his tracks. The defense says that is nothing. But here's the real tea. It doesn't matter what one attorney says in a press statement. What matters is that every one of these incidents inside MDC Los Angeles, the 3-way calls, the Apple Watch, the attempt to destroy it, was used by the prosecution in court filings to argue that this man will not follow rules under any circumstances and should remain detained. And every one of those incidents directly impacted the prison conditions Dirk was subjected to. The phone violation sank the bond. The Apple Watch put him in solitary for 5 months. The sum of those parts is why Dirk is still at MDC right now in the general population. No trial date that's stuck, waiting on August 25th, 2026. Here's the part of this story that most people haven't sat with long enough. No cap. Because through all of this, the solitary, the bond denials, the new charges, the feds seizing his unreleased music, the trial delays, the 5 months in a box, Dirk has been sending signals out from inside that building that tell a very specific story about who he is and what this experience is doing to him. In January 2026, while he was still in solitary, he posted to his Instagram story over a black screen. No music, no captions, just words. Crazy how you gotta wait until it's dark out to see who really with you. That hit different, because what he was describing was not just the legal situation, it was the human one. When you get arrested on charges this serious, when you disappear into federal custody for months at a time and your communications are restricted to one phone call every 30 days, you find out in real time who was really riding for you and who was riding for the version of you that was free and rich and relevant. His longtime DJ, Maurice DJ Reese Davis, spoke publicly about the absence. It's a void there. The community felt Dirk's disappearance in a way that had nothing to do with music. By March of 2026, Durk had been moved back to general population for a couple of months. On March 31st, he posted a voice message to his followers. And what he said in that voice message, gang, you need to hear this in the context of everything he had been through. He said, I just want to give y'all an update on my mind state. I've just been reading these books, working on my patience.
I just been reading, getting into these books, just working on my patience. I've been reading Pawns in the Game by William Carr, Huey P. Newton.
He then listed what he had been reading. Fred Hampton, Elaine Brown, Huey P. Newton. Revolutionaries, he called them. People who had been through the system, who had stood for something that a lot of people don't know of or forgot about.
Fred Hampton, Elaine Brown, just all the revolutionaries, who've been through something and stand for something that a lot of people don't know of or forgot about.
He also mentioned Pawns in the Game by William Guy Carr, a book that analyzes the architecture of global power and the structure of institutions. This man is in a federal prison, facing a potential life sentence, and he is in there studying the Black Panther Party and geopolitical theory. But then he said the thing that really made the culture pause. He said, it's just been sitting on my heart lately, bro. I want to save the generation, save these kids. I'm just tired of being a pawn for the culture, entertaining and being ignorant. Tired of being a pawn for the culture.
It's just been sitting on my heart lately to just save the generation, bro. Save these kids. They don't deserve it. I'm just tired of being a pawn for the culture.
Think about what that means coming from him specifically. This is a man who built his entire artistic identity on the streets of Englewood, Chicago, one of the most dangerous zip codes in the country, who rapped about pain and loss and survival because he lived it, who lost King Von, his closest creative partner, in 2020, who lost his own brother D-Thang in 2021, who lost multiple OTF members to gun violence over the course of his entire career, who turned all of that into music and a label and a Grammy, and whose music the federal government is now using in court to argue he is the leader of a criminal enterprise. And now, sitting in a federal detention center, he is saying he does not want to be that anymore. He said, we gotta be their heroes, talking about kids. He mentioned Jay-Z going through his situation and fans still turning their backs. He mentioned the Drake and Kendrick beef and what it said about the culture. This was not a man performing transformation for an audience. This was a man who has spent over a year in federal custody, including 5 months in solitary confinement, and has come out the other side reading Fred Hampton and saying he wants to save the generation. His family has stood beside him throughout all of it. His wife, India Royale, the couple married in 2024, the same year as his arrest, has kept things together on the outside. His nonprofit, Neighborhood Heroes, has been navigating how to continue its work without him physically there. Kevin Freeman, the executive director of Neighborhood Heroes, reflected on what it felt like when the news of the arrest dropped. I was like, tell me this is not going to be how this ends. It felt like it was intentionally planned to snatch this after it was built up at that moment. Meanwhile, Durk's music has been moving on its own, separate from all of this legal turbulence. Deep Thoughts dropped on March 28, 2025 from Inside Custody. It debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 and became the 3rd highest streamed album of all of 2025. He earned 53 RIAA certifications that year, more than any other rapper, which put him in RIAA's top 50 artists of all time at 52.2 million units sold. His cultural footprint is bigger than it has ever been, and he is locked in a cell, unable to walk into a studio, unable to step on a stage, unable to see his kids except through what limited access the federal system allows. Let me zoom out for real now, because the story of how Lil Durk is being treated in prison is not just a story about one man. It is a story about what the federal system does to black men in hip-hop when it decides they are a target, and it is a story that has been told before. You want to talk about the pattern, gang? Young Thug sat in a Georgia jail for years before his YSL RICO case resolved. Gunna got caught up in the same net. Meek Mill spent years in and out of the system on probation violations that many legal observers described as disproportionate. Puff Daddy has been held at MDC Brooklyn awaiting his own federal trial. The federal government has developed a playbook for high-profile rap cases, and you can see every page of it in what is happening to Durk. Expanded indictments, new charges added after the initial arrest, use of song lyrics as evidence, until the court rejects that and they fall back on everything else. RICO-adjacent framing that labels a music collective a hybrid gang, requests for anonymous juries that are normally reserved for organized crime and terrorism, bond denials no matter how much money and security you put on the table. This is not speculation. This is documented in court filings. The federal government, in their own words, filed with a Los Angeles federal court called OTF, a hybrid organization that blends legitimate business with organized crime. They said Dirk uses his money, influence, and power to endanger individuals whom he perceives as a threat, and they used those characterizations to justify keeping a man in solitary confinement for 5 months without a formal disciplinary hearing, and to justify 4 separate bond denials despite a $4.5 million package. And here's the question that should stay with everybody watching this. At what point does pretrial treatment become its own form of punishment? Dirk has not been convicted. A jury has never looked at the evidence and returned a verdict. He has sat at a defense table in a beige jail uniform and a kufi cap, entered his not guilty plea, stood up, put his hand over his heart, smiled at his family, and walked back into custody. Over and over, and in between those court appearances, he has been in a cell barely big enough for a bed, a toilet, and a sink, getting 1 phone call per month with no visits, no commissary, and no formal disciplinary hearing for 5 straight months. The 8th Amendment exists for exactly this situation. The Due Process Clause exists for exactly this situation. His attorneys argued both of those things in federal court. They won that fight and got him out of solitary. But the fact that they had to fight it at all, that it took 131 days and a court motion to address conditions that the BOP's own regulations say should have triggered a review within 5 working days, tells you exactly how much the system respects the presumption of innocence when the name on the cell is someone the government has decided is a priority target. Now here is where we are today. The trial is currently scheduled for August 25, 2026. His legal team has been completely rebuilt and leveled up. Brian Steele, the same attorney who represented Young Thug through the YSL RICO trial, one of the most complex rap-related federal cases in recent memory, joined Dirk's defense team in early 2026, replacing Jonathan Brayman. Drew Findling remains on the case. These are serious lawyers for a serious situation. His team has gotten the lyrics thrown out. They got him out of solitary. They have challenged every piece of evidence, including the Apple Watch. They have pushed back on the anonymous jury request. They have filed motions to dismiss on grounds that the indictment lacks sufficient factual specificity. They are not done fighting, not even close, but Dirk is still in there. Right now, today, while you're watching this, he's in general population at MDC Los Angeles, waiting on a trial that has been delayed 4 times on charges that carry a mandatory minimum of life in federal prison. His kids are growing up without him home. His wife is holding things together. His nonprofit is operating without its founder. His music is breaking records without its creator in a booth. And he is in there reading Fred Hampton and telling the culture he wants to save the generation. When the most feared man in all of Los Angeles, a man who called himself the self-proclaimed most dangerous man in the city, ends up in critical condition behind bars, getting worked on by the very gang he built his entire legacy on top of, you know something has gone catastrophically wrong. Federal prosecutors literally describe Big U as the self-professed most dangerous man in LA. And yet right now, inside a federal detention center, this man is fighting for his life in a way no street reputation can protect him from. But I assure you, the real story here goes so much deeper than what the blogs are reporting. Because while everyone's talking about Big U getting hemmed up inside, the feds are out here quietly pointing fingers at this man in connection with one of the most heartbreaking murders in hip-hop history, the death of Nipsey Hussle. And what makes it even more sinister is the part the media keeps conveniently leaving out. See, there's one thing, one detail buried deep in a superseding federal indictment that changes everything about how you look at Big U, Nipsey, and the entire legacy of the Rolling 60s Crips. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why the men Big U built his empire with are the same men who may now be his biggest threat. Stay with me, because this story is far from over. But before we get into the main revelation, I need you to first understand who Eugene Big U Henley Jr. really is, and how we got here. because the average person only knows the surface version of this man, and the surface version is a lie. Eugene Big U Henley Jr. is the alleged leader of the Rolling 60s Los Angeles Crips street gang. After serving 13 years in prison for a robbery gone bad in 1991, Henley resurfaced and assumed the role of a music manager and community activist. That's the story he told the world. Reformed OG, anti-gang crusader, mentor to the youth, music executive who launched careers, and for years, people believed it. Now understand the time period we're talking about. This is early 1990s South Los Angeles. The crack epidemic is destroying communities. Gang violence is at an all-time high. The Rolling 60s Crips, with around 1,600 active members, had long been involved in criminal activities. Big U's rise within the gang earned him a reputation as a feared enforcer, involved in drug dealing and violent robberies. This reputation only grew through the 90s as his ambition led to detrimental choices that resulted in his incarceration. In 1991, it all came crashing down. He was arrested in a sting operation after he and another person attempted to rob someone they assumed to be a drug dealer. What he didn't know was that person was an undercover deputy. He got hit hard. 13 years gone, just like that. Now here's where things get interesting, because when Big U came home in 2004, he didn't come back the same way most OGs come back. Nah, he came back with a plan. Upon his release, Big U's claims of rehabilitation and his philanthropic efforts began to garner him respect and credibility. He became a part of Los Angeles's gang reduction and youth development program, receiving significant funding to aid his nonprofit endeavors. He founded a nonprofit called Developing Options. He got city money. He got celebrity donations. He got NBA players like Draymond Green and Shaquille O'Neal writing checks to his organization. And through all of it, he was building his music career, first managing Corrupt, then linking up with Death Row through Suge Knight. But the crown jewel of everything Big U built in the music industry, the relationship that made him untouchable in LA's hip-hop world, was his connection to a young Crenshaw rapper by the name of Nipsey Hussle. Henley is noted as a key figure in the rise of Nipsey Hussle's career. Both men were Rolling 60s. Both men were from the same community, and for a time they moved together. Big U helped put Nipsey on. He used his street credibility and his industry connections to open doors. And Nipsey, a man who genuinely loved his community and dedicated his life to building it up, became the greatest ambassador the Rolling 60s ever had. Now listen closely, because what I'm going to say next brings everything together. Nipsey Hussle was murdered on March 31st, 2019. Shot down in front of his own Marathon clothing store in Crenshaw. Eric Holder was convicted of pulling the trigger and is currently serving 60 years to life. That part you probably know. But what you might not know is that the relationship between Big U and Nipsey didn't stay clean. It didn't stay brotherly. And the federal government has something to say about what that relationship actually looked like behind closed doors. March 19th, 2025, federal agents launched what they call Operation Drawdown, a sweeping crackdown on the Rolling 60s neighborhood Crips. Eugene Henley Jr., known as Big U, was one of 18 members of the Rolling 60s neighborhood Crips charged in a federal complaint with a litany of federal crimes including drug trafficking, conspiracy, and firearms offenses. But Big U wasn't just another name on the indictment. He was the name, the lead defendant, the man at the very top. Federal prosecutors allege that Eugene Big U Henley, once recognized as an OG of LA's Rolling 60s, claimed to have turned his life around. Yet behind the scenes, he was extorting high-profile athletes and celebrities for protection. According to a 107-page federal complaint, the so-called Big U enterprise functioned like a mafia, allegedly carrying out acts of extortion, robbery, fraud, and murder, all under the illusion of community activism. At a press conference, the U.S. attorney did not hold back. He alleged Big U had maintained the image of an entertainment industry entrepreneur running a music label and of somebody who gives back to the community here in Los Angeles. But the facts alleged in the complaint paint a very different picture. One of a murderer, a thief, a liar, and a cheat, and the criminals that enabled him. Now here's where Nipsey Hussle enters this story in a way that should make every single person watching this sit all the way up. In his federal RICO case, the indictment claims Big U is heard on wiretapped calls saying he was bigger than Nipsey and that he disciplined Hussle before his murder. Read that again. The feds, with their wiretaps, with their surveillance, with their 4-year investigation, caught Big U on recorded calls saying he was bigger than Nipsey, that he disciplined Nipsey before his murder. But did any of that stop there? Well, no. It only got more complicated when a superseding indictment dropped with even more details. The superseding indictment references alleged tensions with Nipsey Hussle. Federal prosecutors claim they intercepted phone calls years after the incident, in which Henley allegedly called himself the hunter of the rolling 60s neighborhood Crips and alluded to gang intimidation. And here's the part that might actually interest you, because it connects directly to something that was circulating in the streets for years before the feds ever got involved. The feds wanted to get their hands on a cease and desist letter Big U sent to the No Jumper podcast regarding an episode where Loose Cannon claimed Big U had prior knowledge of Nipsey's death before the fatal March 2019 shooting. Think about what that means. Loose Cannon, one of Big U's own affiliates, someone from inside the circle, went on a podcast and said Big U knew Nipsey was going to die. And when that episode aired, Big U didn't just deny it. He sent lawyers. He sent a cease and desist. He tried to make it disappear. And now the federal government is out here wanting that letter as evidence. The superseding indictment also alleges that Henley reflected on an altercation involving Nipsey Hussle and other individuals by suggesting he would have had a problem with any man if things hadn't smoothed out. He allegedly said the issue would have been resolved, and he wouldn't be here or I wouldn't be here, and he wouldn't be here or I wouldn't be here. Now, to be clear and to be fair to the facts, the feds have not officially alleged Big U had any connection to the Nipsey slaying, and that crime is not part of the RICO indictment. Eric Holder Jr. is the only person arrested, charged, and convicted for Nipsey's murder and is currently doing 60 years to life. But if you do the math, if you look at the wiretapped calls, the cease and desist, the statements about disciplining Nipsey, the he wouldn't be here quote, and the fact that the federal government specifically went to Adam 22 hunting for evidence connected to Big U's potential Nipsey ties, the picture that emerges is murky at best, and on the streets, murky is enough. Why did all of this matter inside a federal prison? Well, it all boils down to one thing. Nipsey Hussle wasn't just loved by hip-hop fans. Nipsey was loved, deeply loved, by Crips everywhere. Not just the 60s, not just Crenshaw, everywhere. And when you're Big U, locked up in a federal detention center full of gang members who idolize the man those wiretapped calls suggest you might have had issues with, that becomes a problem that no OG status in the world can fix. Now let's talk about what's actually happening to Big U behind bars right now, because this is the part the blogs aren't fully connecting. After his arrest on March 19, 2025, Big U appeared for a detention hearing where the judge rejected his bid to be released on bail. The judge agreed with the government that there was sufficient evidence that Henley was a flight risk as well as a danger to the community. So he went in, and from the very beginning, things inside were not what Big U expected. Henley claims in a document filed to the United States District Court that he has been a target of abuse and cruelty while locked up at MDC Los Angeles. On January 1st, 2026, Big U was moved to the SHU, the Special Housing Unit, better known as the Hole, solitary confinement. And here's where it gets critical. In his own words, after I was moved to SHU on January 1st, 2026, my CPAP machine and plug were taken. I was allowed to use the CPAP briefly, but then it was taken away again. Since that time, I have repeatedly requested that it be returned and have explained that I am worried about serious health consequences if I go without it. Out of fear for his life, Henley writes, I cannot allow myself to fall asleep whatsoever. Let that sink in. The man who once called himself the most dangerous man in Los Angeles is now so afraid of what could happen to him in his sleep that he literally refuses to close his eyes. Without the CPAP machine and the full set of accommodations, he says he has trouble focusing and feels physically worn down. That makes it much harder to concentrate during legal visits or review any materials received. And it wasn't just the breathing machine. His legal mail was withheld after he was placed in solitary confinement. He also recounted being prevented from attending the funeral of his own son, Jabari, known as Baby Huey Henley, who was murdered last October at just 34 years old. He was not allowed private viewing even though there was a court order allowing it. Now understand the significance of all this. A man is being held in solitary, denied medical equipment that he needs to survive, denied the right to bury his own child, and the conditions around him inside MDC Los Angeles are getting worse by the day. And here's the disturbing detail that nobody's putting together in one place. Big U, the self-proclaimed leader of the rolling 60s neighborhood Crips, is sitting inside a federal facility that houses other gang members, other Crips. Men who grew up putting Nipsey Hussle's music on blast. Men who tattooed TMC on their bodies. Men who know every whisper about Big U's alleged beef with Nipsey. Every wiretapped call that's leaked out, every word that Loose Cannon said on that No Jumper episode. You see, in the streets, there's a code, and when you're accused, even just accused, not convicted, of having something to do with the death of a man that an entire culture mourns, that follows you behind those walls in a way nothing else does. The feds can say they haven't charged him with Nipsey's murder all they want, but inside a federal detention center, it ain't about what you're charged with. It's about what people believe. And what people believe about Big U right now, in those halls, in those units, on those tiers, is dangerous. The man who built his whole legacy on being untouchable is now the most touchable person in the building. Now let's break down what Big U is actually up against in court, cause this case is one of the most complex federal prosecutions in hip-hop history. The charges include 1 count of conspiracy to violate the RICO Act, 2 counts of conspiracy to interfere with commerce by robbery and extortion, 1 count of Hobbs Act robbery, 9 counts of attempted Hobbs Act extortion, 5 counts of Hobbs Act extortion, 1 count of Mann Act violation related to prostitution, 15 counts of wire fraud, 5 counts of embezzlement, 1 count of bank fraud, 1 count of tax evasion, and 2 counts of willful failure to file a tax return. 43 counts total, and at the center of all of it is a murder charge. The indictment alleges Henley murdered an aspiring artist from his own unique music record label, a rapper named Rayshawn Williams, after Williams made a diss track about him. The music executive allegedly paid for Rayshawn to record at a studio in Las Vegas. After he found out about the diss track, Henley and his co-defendant Sylvester V. Robinson went to Vegas to confront him. Henley allegedly drove Rayshawn to North Las Vegas, shot him in the head, and left his body in a ditch in the desert off Interstate 15. He also allegedly ordered an associate to delete security footage from the studio's surveillance cameras and instructed employees not to speak about the murder. To put into context just how personal this alleged murder was, Rayshawn Williams wasn't just some random rapper. According to court documents, the aspiring rapper had been coached by Henley in football since he was young and once lived with him. This was someone Big U knew, someone he mentored, someone he took under his wing. And when that person made a diss track, according to the feds, Big U drove to Las Vegas and put a bullet in his head. And the evidence the government has compiled is staggering. Prosecutors claim to have 20,000 intercepted audio calls, as well as numerous surreptitious audio and video recordings. They also cite law enforcement reports, search warrants, criminal history documents, recordings, and photographs. The data totals over 60 gigabytes of material, over 60 gigabytes, 20,000 intercepted phone calls. They have been listening to this man for years, every call, every conversation. And remember, some of those calls allegedly include him talking about being bigger than Nipsey, talking about disciplining Nipsey, talking about how he wouldn't be here. And in one call captured by a law enforcement wiretap, Henley even addressed his own dual image directly, saying, "I'm retired, activist, I'll pull up on your block right now and show up and show out. That's what happened to the last ones who thought I was retired." This is the man who was cashing city checks, taking donations from NBA players, running an anti-gang nonprofit, and on the same phone, the same calls, he's talking like that. The duality is almost unbelievable. The only question left to answer right now is, does Big U have any realistic shot at walking out of this? And I'm going to give you the honest breakdown. First, the trial situation. Eugene Big U Henley's RICO trial, which had been set to begin in May 2026, has been pushed all the way back to February 16, 2027, despite his own objection. His own lawyers asked for the delay. Big U himself wanted to go to trial as soon as possible. That alone is either a sign of someone who believes deeply in his innocence or someone who doesn't fully understand what he's up against. His attorney, Arturo Hernandez, cited a breakdown in communication and trust while requesting to be removed from the case. The attorney-client relationship, he stated, had deteriorated to the point where continued representation would be unfair to both the client and the court. So Big U lost his lawyer, and now he's talking about representing himself in a 43-count federal RICO case against the full resources of the United States Department of Justice. Federal RICO cases are notoriously complex, requiring mastery of legal procedures, evidence rules, and courtroom strategy, skills typically honed over years of legal training. Henley has no formal legal background. Legal experts warn that defendants who represent themselves often struggle to counter the government's resources, which include seasoned prosecutors, extensive evidence, and cooperating witnesses. But ironically, Big U's own instincts might not be completely wrong. Here's something no one actually talks about in the broader coverage. Federal RICO cases, despite their fearsome reputation, are not automatic convictions. The government has to prove every single count beyond a reasonable doubt, and with 43 counts, that's 43 individual battles the prosecution has to win. Big U has maintained his innocence from day one. He has already pleaded not guilty and has maintained his innocence on all counts since his initial arrest. Before he turned himself in, he made videos on social media pleading his case to the public. He understands that the court of public opinion matters. And in a city like Los Angeles, a city with a complicated history with institutions that have criminalized black communities for generations, a jury could be persuadable. But even if we give Big U every benefit of the doubt, even if we say some of these charges get knocked down or dismissed, the murder charge alone is a life sentence if it sticks. If convicted, he could face a statutory maximum sentence of life in federal prison. And the cooperating witnesses situation could be the thing that breaks this case wide open. Big U's legal team is asking the court to force prosecutors to produce a full slate of materials connected to cooperating witnesses. They want reports, recordings, proffer statements, debrief notes, and any documentation tied to their cooperation. They also want disclosure of any benefits informants may have received. Plea deals, reduced sentences, financial compensation, or promises made in exchange for testimony. In other words, somebody is talking. Multiple somebodies, probably. And Big U is desperately trying to find out who and what exactly they said. His co-defendants' lawyers are arguing they have more than 1.1 million items to go through, including tens of thousands of wiretapped calls and thousands of surveillance videos. 1.1 million items of discovery. Even if half of that is irrelevant, you're still looking at a mountain of evidence that an army of lawyers would struggle to dismantle in time, let alone one man trying to represent himself from a solitary confinement cell with no breathing machine. And here's something no one is actually talking about. While Big U is fighting for his legal life in federal court, the physical danger he faces inside MDC Los Angeles may be just as real. Nipsey Hussle is not just a rapper to the Crips community, he is a symbol, a martyr, a legend who died giving everything back to the neighborhood that raised him. Crips in Los Angeles, Crips in other states, Crips who never even met Nipsey. They all feel his death personally. They all felt what it meant when the marathon ended. And when you're Eugene Big U Henley, sitting in a federal facility, and the streets are whispering, loudly, that you had beef with Nipsey before he died, that you disciplined him, that you said he wouldn't be here, that a member of your own crew said you had prior knowledge of his murder, you are not safe in that building. You are not safe around men who worship Nipsey's legacy, not even if you're an OG, not even if you're the alleged boss of the Rolling 60s, maybe especially because of that. The conditions he's described, being thrown in the hole on New Year's Day, his breathing equipment confiscated, his legal mail withheld, unable to sleep out of fear, paint a picture of a man who is already losing the war on the inside before the trial even begins. The feds say he called himself the Hunter, but right now, inside those walls, the roles look very different. Big U's story isn't finished being written. The trial is set for February 2027. The superseding indictment keeps growing. The cooperating witnesses are talking. And somewhere inside MDC Los Angeles, a 58-year-old man who built an empire on fear and influence is lying awake, literally refusing to sleep, because he's afraid of what happens when he closes his eyes. The most dangerous man in Los Angeles, that's what they called him. And right now, the most dangerous place in the world for Big U is the cell he's sitting in. We'll be watching this case every step of the way. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Big U can beat these charges? And do you think the feds are ever going to officially connect him to what happened to Nipsey? Because based on everything we just broke down, they're getting closer, and the streets already have their answer. To understand how wild this situation is, we need to go back to the beginning, not just the crimes, the full story. Because Tay K ain't just some random rapper who slipped up. His life was crumbling long before he ever picked up a gun. Tamor Trayvon McIntyre was born on June 16, 2000 in Long Beach, California. His father was in prison for most of his early childhood. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth of what this kid walked into from day one. His mother eventually moved him and his sister Beverly to Las Vegas when Tamor was around 8 years old. Then, when his father got out of prison, he moved the whole family to Arlington, Texas, supposedly to chase a better life. What unfolded instead was something nobody should have to go through as a child. Here's the real tea that came out in court. During Tay K's sentencing phase in April 2025, his sister Beverly took the stand and testified about what their father put them through. She described how their father's discipline escalated from belts to 2x4 pieces of lumber. She said the whoopings got worse and worser. And then, pay attention to this part, she testified that when Tamor cried during these beatings, their father would strap him down to an ironing board because he thought the boy was being overdramatic. Tied down to an ironing board and beaten with a plank of wood. This was a child. This is the foundation that Tay K was built on. Trauma stacked on top of trauma before he ever stepped foot outside and made a single decision of his own. At some point, the state intervened. Beverly said Child Protective Services came and took them both away from their mother. She was 7, Tamor was 5. They went into foster care, stayed in an orphanage for a stretch, lived with a foster family in Las Vegas, and eventually ended back in the care of their father in Texas. Back to the abuse. By the time Tamor hit his teenage years in the DFW area, he was already dropping out of Martin High School during his freshman year. He linked up with local rappers, started running with a group called Daytona Boys, and got influenced heavy by Chief Keef, Eazy-E, and Young Pappy. The streets had him before the music even had a chance to save him. And then, in July 2016, when Tamor was just 16 years old, everything exploded. On July 26, 2016, Mansfield, Texas. That's where the story that would define the rest of Tay K's life kicks off. Two women, Megan Holt and Ariana Barrett, set up a lick at the home of 17-year-old Zachary Belote. The plan was to seduce him, then let a crew roll in armed to take drugs and money. Tay K was part of that crew. What they didn't count on was things turning bloody. A gunfight broke out. Belote got shot but survived. His friend, 21-year-old Ethan Walker, was shot in the stomach. He didn't make it. In July 2016, Tay K and 6 others were arrested on capital murder charges. He was 16. Now here's where it gets crazy, because at this point in the story, Tay K is out on bond with a GPS ankle monitor while his case drags through the court system. He's supposed to be on house arrest. Instead, he cuts the ankle monitor off. Gone. Vanishes into the wind. And while a nationwide manhunt is actively looking for him, bro goes to San Antonio. And in April 2017, while he is on the run, authorities say he picked up 23-year-old Mark Anthony Saldivar, a photographer, telling him they needed photos for a new song. They drove Saldivar to a Chick-fil-A parking lot near North Star Mall. What happened next is documented in court records. Saldivar was beaten, robbed of his camera equipment, and shot, left for dead in a parking lot. Tay K was 16 when he allegedly pulled the trigger on Ethan Walker. He was 16, just barely crossing into 17, when this happened. That's just the beginning though, because even while all this is going down, Tay K is still rapping. He records The Race, literally about being on the run from the police, while actively evading law enforcement across state lines. He films the music video in front of his own wanted poster, and he releases it on June 30th, 2017. That same day, June 30th, 2017, U.S. Marshals caught up with him in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and arrested him. The song went viral immediately, hit number 44 on the Billboard Hot 100, got certified platinum, and Tay K was sitting in a cell in Texas watching it happen. The internet went crazy. People were rocking Free Tay K shirts. He had celebrity cosigns. The whole culture was treating this situation like it was some kind of legend in the making. But here's what really happened. The moment the handcuffs clicked in New Jersey, the clock started on what was about to be the most disturbing period of this young man's life, because nobody was prepared for what prison was going to look like for Tay K. The early days behind bars were already chaotic. Tay K got transferred to Tarrant County Jail in Fort Worth, and right away it became clear this kid was not going to just sit still and do his time quietly. Almost immediately, corrections officers started clocking behavior that would follow him for years. During his time at Tarrant County Jail, Tay K allegedly shouted profanities and threw out death threats directed at a Tarrant County Sheriff Sergeant. He threw his food tray. He threw wet toilet paper. He went over his allotted phone time repeatedly. Corrections officers testified that he was a menace, taunting staff along the halls, trying to grab and hold officers, hurling wet toilet paper at other inmates. This wasn't just rebellion. This was a teenager with nowhere to put his rage, trapped in a cage doing the only things he knew how to do. Then in August 2018, and this is where it gets truly wild, authorities found a mobile phone hidden in his sock during a search. August 2nd, 2018, a whole burner in his sock in a jail facility. He was immediately charged with possession of a prohibited item, and the response from the facility was swift. On August 14, 2018, Tay got transferred out of Tarrant County Jail and moved to maximum security Lon Evans Corrections Center. And at Lon Evans, they put him on 23-hour lockdown. 23 hours in a cell, 1 hour per day allowed for the gym. That's it. That's the world he woke up to every single day. Let that sink in for a second, fam. 23 hours in a box for a teenager. This is what solitary confinement looks like in practice, and the documented psychological effects of that kind of isolation on a developing brain are severe. We're talking paranoia, depression, anxiety disorders, a complete breakdown of the ability to navigate social situations. The system was essentially placing a traumatized kid who grew up with violence into an even more extreme environment and expecting a different result. But wait, it gets worse. Because Tay wasn't done causing chaos, and the chaos outside his cell wasn't done finding him. March 1st, 2019. This is where the story takes a turn that genuinely shocked people. Multiple outlets reported that Tay, while incarcerated at Tarrant County Jail, awaiting trial for capital murder, had been attempting to organize a full prison gang. He named it the Rugrats, straight out of the Nickelodeon animated series No Cap. The intent, according to prosecutors, was to affiliate the gang with the Crips. Tay is a self-admitted member of the Long Beach Insane Crips and build a rival structure to take on the Texas-based Puro Tango Blast crew already operating inside those walls. Prosecutors filed a notice detailing the gang's alleged organizational structure. Tay had drafted what they were calling the Laws of Power, an actual written rule book for the gang. The rules included: never inform police or correctional officers if caught in illegal activities, never steal from a fellow rugrat, never disobey a higher rank, no hurting or slaughter of children unless necessary. Members were to be jumped in. You were voted in by a sergeant. You couldn't leave unless you were jumped out or got the blessing of 2 sergeants. And the final rule read: love, respect, protect, and cherish your fellow rugrat always. Now let's keep it 100 here, gang. This is simultaneously one of the most absurd and most alarming things documented in this entire case. The absurdity is obvious, the name alone. But the alarming part? This kid was 18 years old, sitting in maximum security with a capital murder case hanging over his head, and his instinct was still to organize, still to build structure, still to play a leadership role. That's the street mentality operating even inside the walls. It doesn't just switch off. A warden received a tip from an informant. The moment the Rugrats' plans became known to facility leadership, Tay was thrown right back into solitary confinement. Just when he thought he'd found some kind of purpose behind those walls, the door slammed shut again. And prosecutors didn't stop there. Their notice also alleged that on top of the gang activity, Tay had assaulted a fellow inmate, hit him on the side of the head, or slammed the inmate's head against a wall, and that inmate ended up in John Peter Smith Hospital by ambulance. Tay was also alleged to have directly threatened a corrections officer, reportedly saying, "I see you on the street, you better run." The street's been talking about all this for years, but let me connect the dots for y'all, because this is where the pattern becomes clear. Every time Tay was given any kind of freedom of movement inside those walls, he was escalating. He wasn't adjusting to confinement. He was fighting it at every single turn. Now here's where people really started connecting the dots. February 2019. A jailhouse photo surfaces on Instagram, and it shakes up the entire rap internet. The photo shows Tay sitting at a visitation booth, holding a prison phone receiver to his ear. But what he's wearing is what caught everyone's attention. It's a red sleeveless garment. People who knew what they were looking at recognized it immediately. An anti-suicide smock. These smocks aren't regular prison clothing. According to documentation on them, they're constructed from quilted nylon cordura, a material so thick it can't be folded or rolled into a cord. The shoulder seams unfasten under pressure specifically so the armholes can't be used as makeshift nooses. These are worn by inmates classified as being an active threat to their own lives. The moment this photo dropped, the internet went into full panic mode. They got Tay on suicide watch was trending. Fans were breaking down in comments. People genuinely believed this young man had reached a breaking point. Then his manager, Ezra Verrill, hopped on Instagram stories to address the situation. And what he said is honestly one of the most revealing things that came out of this entire saga. Verrill stated that the photo was over 7 months old and that Tay K was not suicidal. But here's the real part. He confirmed that Tay K had intentionally faked a mental breakdown to get himself moved out of the solitary confinement conditions he had been living in for close to 2 years. His words were, "Crazy the extremes you have to take it just to be treated humanely in a up situation." Y'all need to hear this clearly. Tay K, who was at this point still a teenager, had been in near total isolation for almost 2 full years, and his solution to escape those conditions was to convince facility staff that he was about to harm himself. That's not just a prison story. That's a story about what prolonged solitary confinement does to a human being. That's a story about a kid who learned that the only way to get anything changed in his environment was to pretend he was about to disappear from it permanently. And what does it say about those conditions that faking a suicide attempt was actually the most rational play available to him? The manager basically confirmed it worked, that the move was tactical, calculated, and successful in getting Tay K treated differently, which means the system was functioning in a way where a fake mental health crisis was more effective than any legitimate complaint or request. That's disturbing on a level that goes far beyond Tay K himself. By the time Tay K had his first sentencing in July 2019, 55 years for the murder of Ethan Walker, the full weight of what was happening started to seep through into his public communications. His team was putting out tweets, allegedly on his behalf, that painted a picture of someone trying to maintain connection with the outside world while the inside world was eating him alive. August 31st, 2019. Less than 2 weeks after he was sentenced to 55 years and extradited to the Bexar County Adult Detention Center in San Antonio, a tweet went out from his account. "Send Tay letters and books. Put money on his books while he's in San Antonio, complete with his inmate number and the facility address. A man sentenced to 5.5 decades behind bars, and the first public message out was asking fans to send books and put money on his books. That's a level of loneliness and disconnection that hits different when you think about it. Then came the tweets that showed a different kind of unraveling. Tay K took to Twitter and claimed that his treatment inside Bexar County Jail was inhumane. He said he felt like a hamster. The direct quotes included, "I'm at war within. I feel like a hamster in here. They're literally treating me like a ferret in here right now." Now, some people clowned those tweets, took them as jokes or theatrics, but the manager had already confirmed that Tay K's conditions had been bad enough for him to fake a breakdown. His own complaints about being treated like a caged animal weren't coming from nowhere. They were consistent with everything that had been documented about his time in solitary. He also took shots at his own management and label situation from inside. Tay K blasted his team for allegedly silencing him, claimed they weren't advocating for him properly, and said he needed new representation for his appeal. From inside a cell, with no real autonomy over his own situation. That's a level of helplessness that produces a different kind of rage. Not the explosive rage of the streets, but the grinding, corrosive kind that comes from watching your entire life spin out of your control from behind a window you can't open. November 2020, rumors started circulating online that Tay K had gotten his sentence extended after an alleged incident involving a prison guard. His management shut those down quickly, saying they weren't true and that Tay K would be home soon. But bro was not home soon. He was not home at all, and the appeal that his team was promising eventually went nowhere meaningful. Then in November 2024, new court photos of Tay K surfaced, and the internet reacted with genuine shock. The photos showed a large, visible scar on the back of his neck. Nobody from his team officially explained where the scar came from or how it got there. The silence around it was loud. Speculation ran wild on social media. Fights inside the facility, something worse. But the scar was real. It was documented in a public court appearance. And nobody in an official capacity stepped up to explain it. That alone tells a story, gang. Fast forward to April 2025. The capital murder trial for the killing of Mark Anthony Saldivar begins on April 1st in Bexar County's 187th District Court. Jury selection had started March 31st. Tay K had already rejected a plea deal back in February 2024, decided to take his chances with a jury rather than accept whatever was being offered. The prosecution's case laid out a grim scene. They argued that Tay K and associates had lured Saldivar, a 23-year-old photographer, to a Chick-fil-A parking lot under the pretense of a photo shoot. That Saldivar was beaten, robbed of his camera equipment, and shot and killed. Tay was 16 at the time. He was on the run for the murder of Ethan Walker when this happened. The defense pushed back. His attorney John Hunter told jurors during closing arguments, Tamor McIntyre is not guilty of capital murder, or manslaughter, and the reason for that is very simple. You have to do it right. You have to do the work. And this case clearly demonstrates the work wasn't done. The defense argued the investigation was sloppy, that witness statements came from people with vested interests, and that the whole case rested too heavily on assumptions. And then Tay-K's sister Beverly took the stand, describing the childhood abuse, the 2x4, the ironing board, the foster care, the generational trauma, in an effort to give the jury context for the man sitting in front of them. A forensic and neuropsychologist testified to Tay-K's mental makeup, noting the generational trauma that included drug abuse, violence, and prostitution in his family history. The defense was laying out not an excuse but an explanation. Here is the environment that produced this person. Here is the trauma that was never addressed. Here is what the system failed to intercept. On April 11, 2025, closing statements were delivered. The jury deliberated, and on April 14, 2025, the verdict came back. Guilty, not of capital murder, but of the lesser charge of murder. The jury stepped back from the most severe classification available. Sentencing followed on April 15th. The judge handed down 80 years. Judge Stephanie Boyd told Tay-K directly, the complainant in this case is deceased, and he needed to internalize that reality. The 55-year sentence and the 80-year sentence run concurrently, meaning they overlap. He's not serving 135 years back-to-back. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice updated their records, and the projected release date that now appears in the system is August 8, 2099. Tay-K is 24 years old as of this recording. He would be 99 years old in 2099. The math says this man is spending the rest of his natural life inside those walls. Here's the real tea that nobody wants to sit with. Tay-K's story is not just a rap cautionary tale. It's not just don't do crime content for the comments section. It is a full-length documentary on what happens when the systems that are supposed to protect children fail at every single stage. And then the same systems that failed them become the ones to cage them. A father in prison, a mother unable to hold the household together, foster care at 5 years old, a return to a home where a child was beaten with lumber and strapped to an ironing board, no stable schooling, dropped out during freshman year, running with the streets before he had any concept of what the consequences looked like at the far end. And then, at 16 years old, decisions got made that sealed a fate that a grown adult couldn't fully comprehend, let alone a child who had been surviving on pure instinct his whole life. That's not excusing the victims. Ethan Walker is dead. He was 21 years old, and he will never get to see the rest of his life. Mark Anthony Saldivar is dead. He was 23 years old, a photographer, just trying to make money, and he was killed in a parking lot. Those families carry that weight every single day. Real recognize real. Those losses are real, and they matter. No cap. And Tay-K will be inside those walls for all of it, inside a system that already documented treating him in conditions bad enough that faking a suicide attempt was the rational move to get better treatment, inside a facility where he showed up to a public court date with an unexplained scar on the back of his neck, inside solitary confinement stretches that the United Nations has classified as a form of torture when extended beyond 15 days. And this kid was documented at close to 2 years. Inside a structure where the only language he learned growing up, dominance, survival, aggression, never show weakness, is the exact behavior that gets you punished harder and isolated deeper. The Rugrats situation is actually one of the most telling things about who Tay-K is at his core. This is a kid who, even locked in a cage with nothing, tried to build something, tried to create order, tried to establish loyalty structures and protect people he considered his own. The instinct wasn't random destruction, it was organization. In a different life, that same instinct builds businesses, builds teams, builds movements. In the life he was handed, it built a prison gang named after a children's cartoon. And now the man who was 17 years old when The Race went platinum is a 24-year-old with a documented release date of 2099. His music still pulls nearly 4 million monthly listeners on Spotify. The Race still lives on playlists around the world. His story is still being talked about in comment sections, in YouTube videos, in scripts like this one. What happened next after the sentence wasn't shock. It was resignation. Social media went quiet on Free TK real fast when that 2099 date dropped, because there's a difference between the romantic version of the story, young king in prison, gonna come home and drop the album of the decade, and the reality, which is that barring some extraordinary legal intervention, Tamor Trayvon McIntyre is going to die in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and the culture has to reckon with what it chose to celebrate in 2017. Because the same song that hit number 44 on the Billboard charts, the same track that got played at parties and went platinum, that song was a celebration of a person evading consequences for murder, and the internet made that person famous for it, made him rich for it, and then watched what the actual conclusion of that story looks like, and it's disturbing in a way that a song could never fully capture. What does it mean that we turned the race into a banger when it was really a farewell? What does it say about the culture that we amplified the mythology of the run and didn't sit with the weight of what he was running from? And what does it say about us that stories like TK's keep happening? Kids from broken homes bounce through systems that failed them, eventually swallowed by a different system that has no real interest in fixing what the first ones broke. Those are the questions that don't have easy answers. And if you've been rocking with this channel, you know we don't do easy answers. We do the full picture. We keep it 100. Drop in the comments. Do you think there's any legal path that changes TK's situation? Do you think the concurrent sentences mean anything real for parole eligibility? And are we as a culture ever going to stop making folk heroes out of people whose stories end here? If you got something to say it below. If you want more breakdowns like this, real stories, no fluff, all the details, you already know what to do. And stay locked, because the next one we got lined up is going to hit just as hard as this one, if not harder.
Well, a South Florida rapper is facing a judge after police say that he was involved in an armed robbery.
Pooh Shiesty watched E-Jizzle get handed 2 decades behind bars, and his reaction has the Memphis streets talking. This ain't your typical I won moment. This is something way deeper, way more complex, and it shows you exactly how real street beef works when the game changes. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're gonna understand why sometimes your op getting locked up by the system feels less like a victory and more like unfinished business. Hit that subscribe button, because this Memphis saga is far from over. To understand how this all played out, we have to break down this whole Pooh Shiesty and E-Jizzle situation for y'all, because this beef is some real street politics type shit that got way too real, way too fast. So check this out. E-Jizzle just got sentenced to 20 years in prison for attempted murder charges, and the street's been waiting to see how Pooh Shiesty would react. Now, Pooh Shiesty is currently a free man after completing his federal sentence and getting released just last month in 2025. That's right, the Memphis legend who was facing serious federal time just touched down on the streets while his biggest op gets handed a 2-decade sentence. But here's where it gets interesting. Pooh's reaction to E-Jizzle getting 20 years wasn't what people expected. No celebration posts, no victory laps, no I won energy. And that got everybody talking about what this really means in the world of Memphis street politics, how it all started. To understand Pooh's reaction and why it matters, we need to go back to the Memphis streets where this whole thing kicked off. Memphis ain't no joke, gang. We talking about one of the most dangerous cities in America, where almost every national gang got a presence and neighborhood crews pop up like corner stores. Pooh Shiesty came up on the south side, repping that chopper gang with his right-hand man, Big 30. His pops was Mob Boss, another Memphis rapper who had his own label, so Shorty had music in his blood. But he also had them streets in his DNA. His father did time when Pooh was young, and growing up in South Memphis, you either adapt or you become a victim. E-Jizzle, that's Eric Anderson, came from North Memphis repping the Bezel gang. North Memphis and South Memphis been at war for years. This ain't no new beef, this is generational smoke that been passed down like family recipes. So when these two started making names for themselves, it was almost inevitable they was gonna clash. Both these dudes went to Central High in South Memphis, so they knew each other before the fame, before the money, before the real problems started. But knowing somebody and respecting somebody is 2 different things in them streets. November 6, 2020, the same day King Von got killed in Atlanta, Pooh Shiesty and Lil Durk dropped Back in Blood. This track wasn't just a song, it was a declaration of war disguised as a hit record. The song contained bars that were direct taunts to E-Jizzle and the Bezel gang over a robbery that Pooh and his chopper gang allegedly committed. They had supposedly broken into one of EBG's spots and stolen some guns, and Pooh was bragging about it on what became one of the hottest songs of 2020. The track shot up the charts, racking up hundreds of millions of streams, and suddenly Pooh Shiesty wasn't just a Memphis street rapper, he was a mainstream star signed to Gucci Mane's 1017 Records. But with that fame came consequences, because E-Jizzle wasn't about to let nobody disrespect his crew on a national level. On New Year's Day 2021, E-Jizzle and his crew member Moo Slime dropped Back in Blood remix, giving their version of events. In the video, they were rocking CGK hoodies, Choppa Gang Killer, making it clear this wasn't just music, this was real smoke. Here's the crazy part. E-Jizzle wasn't even really a rapper before this. He was just a street dude who didn't want Pooh Shiesty getting away with spreading lies just because he was the more popular artist. But when he stepped in that booth, Shorty showed he could spit, and the streets took notice. Pooh took to social media immediately, telling his ops they made a huge mistake. He bragged about his massive numbers, trying to flex his mainstream success. But E-Jizzle wasn't impressed. He was focused on setting the record straight. The original remix got taken down due to copyright issues, but E-Jizzle wasn't done. He dropped another diss track called Rumors, and this one really got under Pooh's skin. The video even featured Quando Rondo on a FaceTime call, which was a direct diss to Lil Durk since King Von had been killed by a member of Rondo's crew. A few days later, E-Jizzle and Moo Slime did an interview with Street Juice TV that really exposed what this beef was about. They confirmed that Back in Blood was a direct diss at them, and they weren't about to let it slide. E-Jizzle broke down the robbery that Pooh had rapped about, saying Pooh and his crew broke into one of their spots when nobody was home and stole some guns. But it wasn't the major heist Pooh made it seem like in the song, just some opportunistic moves he was trying to make sound bigger. But here's what really had E-Jizzle heated. Pooh had also dissed one of their deceased EBG brothers in the track. In the streets, that's crossing a line that can't be uncrossed. When you disrespect the dead, that's when things get personal. Not long after the interview, Pooh started posting cryptic messages on social media that suggested something had happened to one of his ops. Rumors started flying that E-Jizzle had been shot and paralyzed, but the truth was different. E-Jizzle had been shot 3 times in the arm and had to wear a cast, but he wasn't paralyzed. Instead of laying low, Shorty came back harder. He dropped another diss track called Paralyzed, making it clear that the shooting wasn't going to slow down the beef. The most disrespectful bar was about the shooter not going for a kill shot, suggesting they didn't have the guts to finish what they started. But on the same day Paralyzed dropped, Pooh received tragic news. His brother, T-Daw-P, passed away after losing a battle with brain cancer. This forced Pooh to cancel shows and spend time with his family, temporarily cooling down the beef. While beefing with E-Jizzle, Pooh was also dealing with multiple legal cases. First, there was the Bay Harbor Islands, Florida shooting from October 2020.
His real name is Lontrell Williams, and prosecutors say on October 9th, he was involved in an armed robbery in Bay Harbor Islands.
Something went sideways during a meetup. Guns were pulled, and 2 men ended up shot. The whole thing was captured on surveillance cameras. But the incident that really hurt him happened in May 2021 at Miami's King of Diamonds strip club. During his performance, an incident occurred and a shot was fired that hit a security guard in the ankle. Pooh got arrested on June 8, 2021 and was hit with multiple charges. Then the Fed stepped in with conspiracy charges, firearms violations, the whole federal playbook. Shorty went from selling out shows and collaborating with Lil Durk and 21 Savage to sitting in a federal facility. In January 2023, Pooh Shiesty was sentenced to 63 months, that's 5 years and 3 months, in federal prison after taking a plea deal. But with good behavior and time served, he did about 2 years and was released last month in October 2025. While Pooh was locked up, E-Jizzle was still in the streets. And when the system finally caught up with him, it was devastating. In 2022, E-Jizzle got hit with 2 attempted murder charges connected to the ongoing war between EBG and their rivals. At only 23 years old, he was looking at the possibility of spending the rest of his young life behind bars. When that gavel dropped in late 2024, the sentence was brutal: 20 years in prison. He won't be eligible for release until around 2044, when he'll be in his mid-40s. For a dude who was just starting to make a name for himself in the rap game, getting co-signs from Snoop Dogg, it was a crushing blow. Now here's where this story gets really interesting. When E-Jizzle got sentenced to 20 years, people expected Pooh Shiesty, who had just been released, to celebrate, to mock, to do a victory lap. But that's not what happened. Word on the street is Pooh didn't seem happy about it at all. In fact, some people been saying Pooh Shiesty actually seemed disappointed, not because he cares about E. Jizzle personally, but because of what the sentence represents. Let me break this down. When your biggest op gets taken out by the system, locked up for 20 years by judges and prosecutors, that's not the same as handling your business in the streets the way it's supposed to be handled. This is old school street code. You don't want the system to take your op out. You want to face them head up. You want to prove who's really on top. When the feds or the state do it for you, it's like somebody else finished your fight. There's no honor in that, no real victory. It's like winning a championship because the other team got disqualified. Technically, you won, but did you really win? Pooh beat his case, relatively speaking. He only did about 2 years. He's fresh out, young enough to restart his career, still got name recognition and a fan base. He's trying to figure out his next move in music, trying to rebuild. And his biggest op, the one dude who really challenged him musically and in the streets, just got taken off the board completely. But not by Pooh. The system did it, and Pooh didn't have nothing to do with it. There's no satisfaction in that for somebody with Pooh's mindset. It's an empty victory. The beef is over, but not because it was settled. It's over because the government stepped in and removed one of the players. Even with E. Jizzle facing 20 years, this beef ain't really over in the minds of the streets. The tension between Chopper Gang and Bezel Gang didn't disappear. Both crews still got soldiers on the streets who remember every diss, every shooting, every slight. The beef between Pooh Shiesty and E. Jizzle became part of a larger war that consumed Memphis and left bodies dropping. What started as musical taunts escalated into real street violence. Multiple young men lost their lives, each death carrying its own tale of vengeance. The violence got so bad that Memphis media struggled to keep up with the carnage. Pooh is barely home a month, and already people are watching his every move, wondering what he's gonna do next. He's reconnecting with family, figuring out his plans for music, but you can tell something changed while he was locked up. He's more calculated now, more focused on making the right moves. He's seen what happened to his brother T.P. He's watched E. Jizzle get 20 years, and he's experienced federal prison himself. All of that has to change your perspective. The fact that Pooh didn't celebrate E. Jizzle's sentence shows growth, but it also shows how complex these street beefs really are. It's not about being happy your enemy is gone. It's about the principle of how things should be handled, about respect, about the code. What makes this fascinating is the psychology. Pooh could have easily done a victory lap, posted on social media, made it a celebration. The fans would have eaten it up, and he could have used it to rebuild his profile after being gone, but he didn't. And that silence speaks volumes. It shows you that sometimes winning isn't about your opponent losing, it's about how you win. And when the system does it for you, instead of you proving your dominance face to face, it leaves something unresolved. This is the code that governs these beefs, the unwritten rules that turn rap rivalries into life and death situations. It's a code that values respect over safety, reputation over freedom, and street credibility over everything else. The war between Pooh Shiesty and E. Jizzle is a cautionary tale about how quickly things can spiral out of control. It started with some bars in a song and spiraled into violence, legal troubles, and prison sentences that affected multiple lives. This is the kind of war where no one really wins. Mothers on both sides have lost sons. Young children have grown up surrounded by violence. An entire community bears the scars. Both Pooh Shiesty and E. Jizzle had talent and potential to make it out through music. Pooh actually made it to mainstream success with platinum records and collaborations with the biggest names in rap. E. Jizzle showed he had skills too, earning respect from legends like Snoop Dogg. But the same authenticity that made their music compelling also trapped them in a cycle that cost them years of their lives. The streets they represented became the streets that claimed their freedom. Looking forward, what happens if these two ever cross paths again? E. Jizzle won't be eligible for release until the 2040s. Pooh Shiesty will be in his 40s by then, potentially with a completely different life. But in the streets, some beefs never die. They just wait. The expectations of their crews, their neighborhoods, their reputations might not let them ever truly move on, even decades later. The street's been watching this unfold, and it's showing the younger generation that these beefs don't just disappear when somebody gets locked up. The cycle continues, and the consequences keep piling up. This is real life, real consequences, and real beef that consumed two talented young men. The story of Pooh Shiesty and E. Jizzle is a reminder that when street politics mix with rap fame, everybody pays a price. But we gotta ask, is that mentality worth it? Is holding on to these codes worth losing years of your life? Is it worth missing your kids growing up, throwing away opportunities that most people would kill for? The answer should be obvious, but in the streets, nothing is ever that simple. The pull of reputation, the weight of respect, the pressure to live up to the image you created, all of that makes it almost impossible to walk away even when you know you should. This story shows you the real cost of street fame and the codes that govern these beefs. Pooh Shiesty's reaction, or lack thereof, to his biggest op getting 20 years tells you everything about how deep these mentalities run. What y'all think? Should Pooh Shiesty have celebrated E. Jizzle getting 20 years? Is E. Jizzle's sentence justice or just another tragedy? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into what's really happening in hip-hop, and remember, real recognize real, but sometimes real gets you real time. That's the truth these streets been teaching for generations. The streets don't forget, and neither do we. This is the real cost of keeping it 100 in a world where authenticity can cost you everything.
I mean, I don't know exactly like what you're going to be comfortable talking about, but everybody keeps saying that you were the trigger man. Is that accurate?
Next question.
Can't talk about that.
Can't talk about that.
Why did he end up getting shot anyway? Like, why? Especially
I don't feel like the drugs was part of the situation. I just feel like, I don't know, we was just kids being kids from the hood. Too much movement. That's all, too much movement.
Pop Smoke's killer is reportedly at the center of a new street incident after being caught lacking by New York goons. And not just any killer, we're talking about the same individual who avoided a life sentence because he was too young at the time of the crime. For months, he had been moving recklessly, trolling Pop Smoke online, making disrespectful comments, and even going on podcasts speaking openly about the case like nothing could ever happen to him. But according to street sources, that confidence didn't last long, because once word spread, the streets responded. And if that wasn't already wild enough, what later happened to the brother of the other shooter took things to another level, found on a beach, inside a barrel. This whole situation feels unreal, but it's being talked about heavily right now. Let's break it down. So look, for those who don't know the full story, let me bring y'all up to speed real quick. February 19th, 2020. That's the day the music world lost Pop Smoke, one of the most promising young talents to come out of Brooklyn in years.
Pop Smoke was known by some of the biggest names in the business, like Nicki Minaj and 50 Cent. His murder has stunned fans everywhere.
Everybody's talking about it. Police say suspects broke into his home and shot him.
Shorty was only 20 years old when he got murdered during a home invasion in the Hollywood Hills. The whole situation was tragic, man. Pop was supposed to be the next big thing, and just like that, he was gone. Now, 5 people got arrested in connection to his murder. Most of them were teenagers, literal kids who decided to go on what they thought was gonna be a simple lick. But one of these dudes, the one who everybody been saying was the trigger man, he was only 15 at the time. That meant when he eventually admitted to the killing in juvenile court, he couldn't get hit with life. Instead, he got sent to a juvenile facility until he turns 25. That's it. No life sentence. No real consequences that matched the severity of what he did. Fast forward to him getting out, and this is where the story gets absolutely wild. This kid really thought he could just walk back into society and move however he wanted. He thought because he did his little juvenile bid that everything was cool. But New York had other plans for him, fam. Trust me on that. And before we get into what happened to the killer, let me remind y'all why Pop Smoke's death hit so different. This wasn't just another rapper getting killed. Pop Smoke was literally changing the sound of New York hip-hop. He brought Brooklyn drill to the mainstream in a way nobody else could. Songs like Welcome to the Party, Dior, and For the Night weren't just hits. They were anthems that had the whole city moving. Pop had that voice, bro. That deep, gravelly tone that you couldn't mistake for anyone else. He had the presence, the charisma, the star power. Major artists were already lining up to work with him. Travis Scott, Nicki Minaj, Quavo, everybody wanted a piece of what Pop Smoke was bringing to the table. He was only getting started, and the industry knew he was gonna be massive. His album Shoot for the Stars, Aim for the Moon dropped after his death and went straight to #1. It stayed on the charts for weeks. That's the kind of impact he had. People weren't just mourning a rapper. They were mourning what could have been. They were mourning a generational talent that got taken way too soon. So when his killer gets out and starts moving reckless, starts talking about the murder like it's nothing, you gotta understand the level of disrespect that represents. This ain't just about one person. It's about disrespecting an entire city, an entire culture, and millions of fans who still bump Pop's music every single day. So boom, Shorty gets out, and instead of moving in silence, instead of showing any kind of remorse or trying to disappear into obscurity, this man decides to go on podcasts and talk about the situation. I'm talking full-blown interviews where he's basically reliving the night he took Pop Smoke's life. And the way he was talking, man, it was disrespectful as hell. Let me break down some of what he said because this is important. In one interview, the host is asking him about that night, right? Trying to get details about whether it was a planned hit or just a robbery gone wrong. And listen to how casual this dude sounds when he's talking about it. It was a robbery. Nobody sent us there. Nobody did none of that. That's all false information. It's a lot of pages that's like giving out false information on YouTube. They don't know nothing. Y'all don't know nothing. Y'all just assuming and y'all just putting together as y'all going around.
How would you describe what was going on that night? Maybe even just like take us through the day if you want.
Well, I'm not finna get into detail about too much, but it was a robbery. Nobody sent us, nobody did none of that. That's all false information. It's a lot of pages that's like giving out false information. YouTube's like the vlog, false, like they don't know nothing. Y'all don't know nothing y'all talking about. Y'all just assuming and y'all just putting shit together as y'all going around.
Bro is talking about murdering one of New York's most beloved artists like he's discussing what he had for breakfast. No emotion, no remorse, just straight matter-of-fact type energy. He's out here correcting the narrative like he's some kind of historian, not a killer. And it gets worse, fam. It gets so much worse. The interviewer asks him about all the YouTube videos and coverage of the case. And this kid has the nerve to say, the way they bring up the situation and they be saying like rest in peace to them, they be disrespectful. I don't know, I just feel like if that was my boy and they're posting them and speaking on a situation like that, I feel like you my op too.
Then like the way they bring up the situation and they be saying like rest in peace to them, they be disrespectful themselves. They be like I don't know. I just feel like if that was my boy and they're posting them and speaking on a situation like that, like I feel like you my op too.
What's the disrespectful part?
You catching this? He's calling people disrespectful for talking about Pop Smoke's death. The man who killed him is out here saying other people are being disrespectful. The audacity is crazy, bro. The lack of self-awareness is absolutely mind-blowing. When the interviewer tries to dig deeper into how they found the address, there was all this talk about Mike D, Pop's homie, posting a picture outside the house and a gift bag with the address visible in the background. The kid says, that part I can't speak about because I don't know how the address got found. I don't know. I'm not going to say a lie to nobody.
But they'd be putting it together with like saying that there was, a bag with an address that was posted online. There was a photo of him and his friend where you could see the address in the background. Is a lot of that not true? It's just people putting shit together after the fact?
Oh, that part I can't speak about because I don't know how the address got. I don't know that part. So I can't even speak on that. I'm not finna share a lie to nobody.
But then he admits some wild stuff. He says, I didn't know him at all. I didn't know of him. I probably seen one picture of him before and I thought he was a model. I was like, he got a good modeling career going on.
I didn't know of him. I probably seen one picture of him before and like I thought he was a model. I was like, well, you got a good modeling career going on. I mean, I thought he was just on that route, but then all this happened. I'm like,
a model, bro. He thought Pop Smoke was a model. Didn't even know he was one of the hottest rappers in the game at that time. And then he has the audacity to continue. All of this happened. I'm like, I wake up in the morning. I don't wake up. I didn't go to sleep. I'm just like, damn, I'm just lost. Lost? You just took someone's life and you're lost? That's the remorse you showing? That's the level of accountability you taking?
I wake up in the morning. I don't even wake up. I didn't go to sleep. I'm just like, damn, I'm just lost.
But yo, it gets even crazier when you really break down everything he said in these interviews. The interviewer asks him straight up, were you the trigger man? And you know what this kid says? Next question. That's not a denial, fam. That's basically a confirmation while trying to play it smart legally.
Everybody keeps saying that you were the trigger man. Is that accurate?
Next question.
He can't admit it on camera because that would be stupid, but he also ain't denying it. He's just moving past it like it's an uncomfortable topic at Thanksgiving dinner. Then he starts talking about the night itself in more detail. He says, nobody was intended to get hurt. Nobody was intended to get hurt that night, but then contradicts himself by saying there was too much movement going on. The interviewer asks what he means by too much movement, and he clarifies movement from Pop Smoke, movement from everybody in the house. Too much going on. It wasn't intentionally. We wasn't on that.
Too much movement. That's all. Too much movement. Movement from everybody. Too much shit going on. It was too much shit going on. So it's like it wasn't intentionally. We wasn't on that.
So which is it, bro? Was it an accident or was there too much movement that forced y'all hands? Because those are two different stories. And the fact that he can't keep his story straight while casually discussing taking someone's life, that's what really got people heated. He even admitted he was high that night. He said, "I was off a perk, so I wasn't really fully aware of anything." So you're telling me you made the decision to go on a robbery mission while high off pills, not even fully aware of what you were doing, and someone ended up dead? And you think that makes it better? You think that excuses anything? The interviewer asks if he and his crew had gone on missions like this before, and he just says, "Next question." Again, not a denial, just dodging.
Had y'all gone on missions like this before?
Next question.
But the implication is clear. This wasn't their first time trying to rob somebody. They were out here really on that timing, thinking they could just hit licks and nothing would go wrong. When asked if they knew anyone in the house that night or if someone backdoored Pop, he gets a little more definitive. Nobody backdoored nobody. I know that 100% for sure. Nobody backdoored nobody. That female, I can't speak too much on it, but she don't know what she's talking about at all.
Nobody backdoored nobody. Let's clear that up. Nobody, I know that 100% for sure. Nobody backdoored nobody. That female, I can't speak too much on it, but her, she don't know what she's talking about at all.
So he's clearing up the backdoor rumors, but in the most disrespectful way possible. He's talking about the situation like he's doing a service by setting the record straight, not like he's the reason a man is dead. But here's where it really gets disrespectful, and this is what pushed people over the edge. After doing these interviews, this dude starts moving on social media like he's some kind of celebrity. We're talking about posting on IG, making subliminal references, moving like he's proud of what he did. He's out here acting like he's famous now, like being Pop Smoke's killer is some kind of badge of honor. The streets was watching all of this, fam. They was taking notes. Every post, every interview, every time he opened his mouth, it was all being cataloged. Because see, when you're from New York and you take out one of New York's own, you better move carefully. You better move like you got enemies on every corner, because you probably do. Pop Smoke wasn't just some random rapper. He was Brooklyn through and through. He had the whole city behind him. His music was anthems in every hood from Brownsville to Bed-Stuy. Dior had everyone doing the woo walk. Welcome to the Party was the soundtrack to every party, every function, every moment when people wanted to feel that energy. And this kid really thought he could just talk about killing Pop like it was nothing. He really thought he could be on podcasts, breaking down the details, saying stuff like, "We was just kids being kids from the hood." Like that excuses murder? Kids being kids is sneaking out the house. Kids being kids is getting caught smoking weed behind the school. Kids being kids is not committing home invasions and taking someone's life. But he kept trying to frame it that way, like they were just young and dumb and didn't know any better. Now here's where the story takes a turn that had everybody talking. Word started spreading through New York that Pop Smoke's killer was moving reckless. People was seeing these interviews. They was seeing him on social media. They was hearing about him being out in public, moving around like he didn't have a care in the world. And let me tell you something about New York, especially Brooklyn. They don't forget. They never forget. So apparently, according to multiple sources on the street and people who stay plugged in, this kid got caught lacking. And when I say lacking, I mean lacking. He was somewhere he had no business being, probably thinking he was safe because he did his time, even though it wasn't nearly enough, and the goons pulled up on him. Now, I can't confirm every single detail because you know how street stuff goes. There's always different versions of the story depending on who you ask. But what's been consistent across multiple sources is that he got beat down bad. We're talking about a proper violation, the type of beating that makes you rethink every decision you made up to that point, the type of beating that reminds you that doing interviews and trolling on social media has consequences. From what people been saying, it wasn't just a quick scrap either. This was personal. This was methodical. This was New York sending a message that you can't disrespect their legends and think you're gonna just walk around freely. They waited for the right moment, caught him when he was vulnerable, and made sure he understood the gravity of what he did. And you know what? A lot of people felt like it was deserved. Not because violence is the answer, it's not, and we should be clear about that, but because of the sheer disrespect this dude showed. You can't murder somebody, get a light sentence because you were young, then turn around and do interviews talking about it like you're proud. You can't move like that and expect there to be no consequences. The streets operate on a different code than the legal system. The courts might have given him juvenile treatment because of his age, but the streets don't care about that. The streets care about respect, about honor, about not disrespecting the dead. And he violated all of that. But yo, here's where this story gets even darker. And this is the part that really shows you how deep this all goes. Remember I mentioned 5 people got arrested in connection to Pop Smoke's murder? One of them was a dude named Jaquan Murphy. He didn't get charged in Pop's case ultimately, but he's currently locked up for an unrelated murder. Real stand-up guy, right? Well, Jaquan has a brother named Javonta Murphy, and this is where things get absolutely horrific. On July 31st, Javonta's body was found in a 55-gallon barrel floating in the water near the Pacific Coast Highway Bridge in Malibu. Yeah, you heard that right. A barrel in the ocean. The story is absolutely crazy, fam. A maintenance worker spotted the barrel first, just floating there in the water. He tried to drag it to shore, but it was too heavy for him to move by himself. So he just left it there, probably thinking it was just trash or something. The next morning, a lifeguard came on duty, saw the barrel, and swam out to retrieve it. When authorities finally opened it up, they found Javonta's naked body inside, stuffed in there like he was nothing. The coroner ruled it a homicide immediately. Now get this, Javonta was an aspiring rapper himself. Dude loved music, had dreams of making it big just like his brother's co-defendant was connected to. He probably grew up listening to hip-hop, dreaming about making it out of his situation, and ended up dead in a barrel in the ocean. That's the tragic reality of how these streets operate. But here's the really crazy part. According to TMZ and the LA County Sheriff's Department, they're investigating whether Javonta's murder was revenge for Pop Smoke's killing. They're exploring whether someone connected to Pop, or just someone who loved Pop's music and felt like justice wasn't served, decided to take matters into their own hands. Let that sink in for a minute. The streets might have taken out one of the people connected to Pop's murder in the most brutal way possible, stuffed in a barrel and thrown in the ocean like he was trash. That's the type of energy that's been circulating since Pop died. That's the level of anger and need for justice that people feel. And when the kid who actually pulled the trigger starts doing podcast tours and talking reckless, when he's on social media moving like he's untouchable, you think people are just gonna let that slide? You think there aren't people out there who feel like the justice system failed Pop Smoke and his family? Here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand, especially if you're not from that life. When you're in the streets, there's a code. It's not written down anywhere, but everybody knows it. You don't brag about bodies. You don't do interviews explaining how you took someone's life. You definitely don't move like you're proud of it, especially when that person was beloved by millions. This kid violated every part of that code. He got out of jail and immediately started moving like he was invincible. He did interviews where he casually discussed the murder. He went on social media and posted like he was a celebrity. He showed zero remorse, zero accountability, zero understanding of the gravity of what he did. And the culture responded exactly how you'd expect it to. The same way the culture has responded throughout hip-hop history when someone violates the code. The same way the streets have always handled people who move recklessly and disrespectfully. They caught him lacking and made an example out of him. Let's keep it real for a minute. The legal system failed Pop Smoke. There's no way around that fact. The person who took his life only got sent to juvenile detention until he's 25. That means he'll be out with his whole life ahead of him. He'll be young enough to start over, to build a career, to have a family, to do all the things Pop Smoke will never get to do. So to anyone out there who thinks they can do something terrible and then brag about it later, this is your warning. The internet doesn't forget, the streets don't forget, and eventually you're gonna have to answer for what you did, one way or another. Pop Smoke's music lives on. His influence on drill music and hip-hop culture continues to this day. Artists still reference him, still pay homage to him, still try to capture that energy he brought to every track. But the man himself is gone, taken way too soon by people who didn't even know his value. Rest in peace to Pop Smoke, a real Brooklyn legend gone too soon. Rest in peace to Javonta Murphy, caught up in circumstances beyond his control. And to everyone else involved in this tragic situation, I hope y'all learned something from all this. Because the culture is watching, the streets are listening, and justice comes in many forms. That's it for this one, fam. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. Was the beating deserved? Is this street justice or just more violence perpetuating the cycle? Should the legal system have been harder on juvenile offenders in cases like this? Drop your thoughts below and let's have a real conversation about it. And as always, stay safe out there. These streets ain't playing no games, and they definitely don't forget. Peace.